What's going on? Welcome to Pantera Basketball Live. Today's structure is going to be quite simple. We are going to go through 12 players as well as 3 additional players that you have suggested in the comments that the Toronto Raptors should target in this offseason to shore up some of their weaknesses. What are those weaknesses? Backup point guard is a weakness. Off guard, we could say just backup guard instead of point guard specifically. Backup guard seems to be a weakness unless you really want to roll into next year with Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley as your only point guards. You know, the Raptors have shed themselves of a lot of their point guard prospects. Malachi Flynn went out in a trade. Jeff Doughton, Delano Banton, these guys went out for nothing. So, you know, perhaps shoring up that backup guard depth would be a good idea. Point of attack defense, rim protection, and certainly just overall talent, right? So instead of thinking of needs as small forward, we think of needs as point of attack defense. Instead of saying needs as center, we think of needs as rim protection. The reason for that is sometimes a wing can do a little bit of both. For instance, Jalen Suggs is a shooting guard who can sometimes play point guard, but he has often been credited with being a pretty good rim protector, but he's also a really good point of attack defender. So he shores up a lot of needs that maybe if you have him on your team, you don't have to get as much of that from your center. Similarly, you have a guy like Jaden McDaniels, brother of Raptor Jalen McDaniels, who is just 1,000 times better than him and younger than him. And he is just a great point of attack defender, but he's also 6'9". So again, offensively and defensively, certain players, they fill certain needs. If you have a need for downhill, gravity in terms of offense, if you have a need for corner shooting, if you have a need for spot up shooting, movement shooting, etc., all of these things can be filled with guys from different positions. Maybe if you have a center who can shoot, you can deal with maybe having a shooting guard who can't shoot as well. All of these things are, I think, the more evolved way to look at basketball. So with that being said, I've identified 12 players, and I will list them out in order. The way I've sorted them out is we'll go from most gettable to least gettable. And I'll let you know throughout. We'll go into their analytics. We'll talk about what these players do well, what they don't do well, and we'll definitely look into what it would take to get them. Some of them are free agents, so it will take money to get them. Some of them are on their rookie contract, and it will take heaven and the moon to get them. Some of them are older veterans, maybe. They're not all young players. Some of them are as old as 32, 33, 34 years old, and some of them are 20. So let's go into it. And John Hamilton saying, love Colette. We'll definitely talk about the draft once the Raptors' entire, whether or not they're keeping the top 6 pick is sorted out. But I will tell you that when it comes to the final guy on this list, who is going to be number 15 on my list, I would absolutely move a top 3 pick to get him. Okay, let's get into it. So number 1 on my list, which is really number 15 on my list. Oh, by the way, I need to mention this. I will be doing potentially 2 more lives today, probably 1 more live, but maybe 2 more lives. I haven't quite figured it out yet. But if you aren't aware, OG Anunoby versus Pascal Siakam is today in 2 hours, and we will definitely be covering that. I haven't quite figured out whether I want to do Jokic, the Nuggets, T-Wolves post game, and the Pacers Knicks, if I want to do it together or if I want to do them separately. I definitely don't want to be missing a game in order to do a game, and I don't want to be watching the game like on delay. So probably I'm going to do them both, and it's going to be really late, but you will get a second live today as well. Okay, let's get into this. So let's start with the most gettable. Marcus Smart. Okay, we're starting in very controversial territory right away, right? And I say he's the most gettable partially because he played 20 games last year. He is approaching 30. He does have $41 million on his contract. I don't know how the Memphis Grizzlies feel about that move, right? But certainly you could make a case that his best days are behind him, right? And so is he a starting guard now? Maybe not. Maybe he is one of those guys that is going to have a second life as an NBA player, but as a backup guard. And I think that's going to be where he is going to be most used. He is still one of the best defenders in the league. He shores up a lot of the Raptors' issues. The Raptors have an abundance of, well, I don't want to say an abundance of creators, but they have creators in RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Scotty Barnes, right? What they don't have is a point of attack defender like Marcus Smart. a guy who can navigate screens like Marcus Smart. He also gives you a ton of rebounding at that position, like Marcus Smart. He gives you rim protection. He is just a really good player overall, and he also gives you veteran leadership, toughness. We already saw the Raptors double down with, their Jakob Poeltl trade by getting Kelly Olynyk. This is not a team that is shying away from bringing in older guys who've been there. And Marcus Smart is not that old. His injury history should probably scare you. He is a bit reckless, but he's a good team player. He has won everywhere he's gone. Okay. And, again, the general framework of how you identify someone who is quote unquote underappreciated, maybe undervalued by the NBA market is two ways, I feel. One, if they are perhaps backing up or backup to a player where they're just not a loaded team. Think about Drazen Petrovic, in the Portland Trailblazers. If you saw an all-star in that third string guard, kudos to you. Most people didn't. So finding a person who is sort of buried in the depth chart can be helpful on a really good team. Conversely, you could also find someone who has scalable abilities on a really bad team, right? So someone on Portland, maybe you're like, I don't really know about that guy on that team, but that guy on my team could be really good. Because typically when you lose a lot, as in your team loses a lot, your players also suffer the tag of being on a losing team. A good example of this would be Kelly Oubre. Kelly Oubre was a guy on the Charlotte Hornets. He put up a lot of numbers. He put up a lot of points, and everyone said, I don't care. You're on the Charlotte Hornets. And so he got a minimum contract with the Sixers, and now he is proving to be a starting caliber player. There are certain teams, especially in the modern CBA, where if you're getting like, I want to say 3 to 5 win shares from $2 million, you have leeway on your roster, right? There are certain teams that are going to pay $35 million for that 5 win shares. So if you can get it on a rookie scale contract or you can get on a minimum, man, kudos to you. That's phenomenal team building. So I think the Raptors need one of those guys to work out. And maybe that, guy is Marcus Smart, but obviously, $41 million, 2 years. This could be one of those situations where Memphis might have to attach some draft equity. Maybe the Raptors can give them the flexibility of giving them Bruce Brown. So you take the 2 years, they get the cap flexibility, and you get a pick for it. Something like that. Because I don't think, obviously, I think Marcus Smart is a better player, than Bruce Brown. He's a much better defender. He's a much better player overall. They're kind of the similar size as well. I think he's a little bit older, but those 2 extra years might be a good way for the Raptors to utilize their utilize their cap space. And maybe you can add, draft equity as well. Maybe a pick swap somewhere down the line, plus a future first round pick that's protected. Does this make a lot of sense? Yeah, I think it could. If he's healthy, he's going to contribute to winning in a big way. He's going to fit in very well to what you're doing. He's already been in a winning situation like Boston where he's had multiple playoff runs. And when you do inevitably go to the playoffs, it's going to help to have someone like him, someone like Jakob. Well, not really Jakob, but someone like Kelly Olynyk. These guys who have these sort of battle scars. It can't all come from Garrett Temple. It can't all come from Thaddeus Young and Otto Porter. It can't come from the end of the bench. At some point, that experience, that toughness has to come, and he is tough as nails, right? He is tough, and he's going to breed toughness, and he's going to push Scotty Barnes, and he's going to push Grady Dick, and he's just going to be a really good, I think he'd be a really, really good presence for the locker room. So that would be my first choice, which is my most gettable guy, which is Marcus Smart. Second most gettable guy, and this was by John Hamilton. I asked you guys in the comments if you had some requests for players. That's Jaylen Smith, a guy that a lot of Raptor fans were very surprised did not come back in the Pascal Siakam trade and would have been really happy to get him back. Well, kudos, because he has a player option for $5.6 million, which is probably a lot less than he could probably get in the open market for a player of his skill, his age. And so, you could look at him and say, all right, he's a rim protector, right? He doesn't do a hell of a lot else. Defensively, he's a pogo stick athlete who is a rim protector who can take threes and make threes at a high enough level, and he's a good rim finisher. Is this guy capable of more? If he was not playing, on a team with Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin, man, they have a lot of guys, right? Isaiah Jackson, they have a lot of bigs, and there's a lot of parity there. And I think this is a great example of when I say a guy can get buried. How much worse is he than Isaiah Jackson? And they got Jarris Walker coming up too. There's no space for him. So if he is going to command $8 million, I think the Pacers are going to have to say, shit, we have bigger priorities. Pascal Siakam, right? So could he be gettable on $7 or $8 million? Sure. Why not? And, maybe he replaces a little bit of that Christian Coloco stuff. Obviously, he is nowhere near the defender, in my opinion, that Christian Coloco was. He's probably nowhere near the passer either. However, he might be somewhere close to the athlete, the sort of vertical lob threat. And also, like, you take a lesson from the RJ Barrett trade, guys who do well in transition do well in Toronto, right? So you could look at that and just say synergistically, okay, the theory of him in Indiana should work pretty well, and it has in spurts. It just so happens they have Miles Turner, Pascal Siakam, Obi Toppin, guys ahead of him. So could he work in Toronto? I wouldn't break the bank for him. I think he's okay. I think he's a rotation big in the NBA. He's certainly worth a hell of a lot more to me than Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman. But he's got concerns, but he's young enough right now where you get him into a player development program, you turn him into a stretch big, maybe he works out for you. Let's move on here. Next up, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Atlanta Hawks, 3 years, $49 million remaining for a 32-year-old guard who is very familiar with the way Darko Rajakovic wants to play basketball, not specifically or not only because he is from the same country as Darko and that they would have a familiar relationship going back multiple years now, 10, 12 years now, they've known each other. That's not even the point. The point is he just really fits into how you want to play basketball. He is an extremely smart player. He's in the 95th percentile in terms of shot quality. His game is going to age pretty well. He is an incredible shooter. I mean, let's take a look at those numbers for a second, if we will. He is, okay, let's just take a look at this. Hold on one sec. Make it a little bit larger. He is shooting on his career. He's a 38% 3-point shooter. Okay. That is important to me. He has real guard skills and real ball skills. He can do some shot creation stuff. He can do some movement shooting stuff, which is good. Offensively, in terms of Crafted's offensive plus minus model, he is in the 92nd percentile, which is like star tier. Load and creation is very, very good. To the people who want Malik Monk, I mean, this is close, right? He just doesn't play on a really good team. And so he's kind of like, a little bit buried, but he does a lot of Malik Monk stuff. He's just a much better defender than Malik Monk. Malik is a much better athlete. It's flashier, sure. But in terms of just shooting and shot quality, I think he's better, right? But he's going to be a hell of a lot cheaper, right? So if the Atlanta Hawks decide to move off of Trae Young, maybe they get back a guard. If they move off of, they're pretty loaded there, right? So I would also explore, and I think the trade with the Hawks would be a two-parter, right? So if they view, or if you view Bogdan Bogdanovic at 32 years old with $49 million in this cap environment, if you view that as a liability, well, the Hawks have plenty of assets to dangle your way, from Kobe Buffkin to AJ Griffin to, I don't know, potentially future draft picks. You're not getting Jalen Johnson at this point. You're probably not getting Onyeka Okongwu. Fine, those guys are untouchable, but you can parlay this into a bigger deal. And would this be a productive use of Bruce Brown's contract? Once again, the Bruce Brown thing. Like, I'm not giving up draft picks for Bogdan Bogdanovic, but would I take back Bogdan Bogdanovic for Bruce Brown, the cap flexibility that the Hawks get from that? It kind of frees them up off of a, pretty serviceable player who's aging up in a way, and the Hawks are not anywhere near competing right now. So they don't really need a 32-year-old at that spot. And maybe Bruce Brown is more useful for them given their current roster construction, their need for defense in the front court. Okay. If you stay with Trae Young and that whole team, okay, fine. So maybe what the deal would be Bruce Brown for Bogdan Bogdanovic plus AJ Griffin, if you believe in AJ Griffin, or maybe Bruce Brown for Bogdan Bogdanovic and Kobe Buffkin, and you throw in the second round pick or something. And so you convert a little bit of your cap flexibility into a little bit of flexibility for them. You take on 3 years of Bogdanovic, and you just hope that he is kind of like what Marcus Smart is, right? Like just a serviceable veteran who's been there, done that, can help guide Grady, can help guide. Yeah, you get a little bit older and you may not see that as a valuable thing given where you are right now. But at some point, like you think about the versions of the Raptors that have been successful in the past from We the North, right? Those guys weren't all toddlers, right? There were some veterans on that team, right? When you consider the team that eventually won it, there were tons of veterans on that team. Danny Green, Marc Gasol, right? Kyle Lowry, like there were older guys. Even when you think back to the previous iteration of the Raptors that maybe some of us remember very familiar, very fondly, that was Muggsy Bogues, Doug Christie, Antonio Davis, Charles Oakley. You need guys who kind of been there, done that, right? You definitely do. You don't want to be entering next year and saying, Scotty Barnes, Emmanuel Quickley, you're in charge. They're not in charge, not yet, right? So I think it'd be good to have some guiding forces around them that can balance out and teach. That teaching part is very important, and it would be very helpful that synergistically he fits very well with what they want to do anyways. Moving on. Sorry, there's a lot of construction going on here. I apologize. There's someone going right above my head. Moving on to Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter, two guys whose stock is trending in the complete opposite direction, but I don't believe that they're that far apart. So Malik Monk got a lot of hype this year, and I think firmly, I was very, very impressed by certain elements of his game, specifically his athleticism, his transition play, his playmaking, his ball handling, his just overall ball skills. There's a lot of theory there that maybe he could transform into something more. Could he be like a poor man's James Harden? I don't think so. But that type of player off the bench, like a bench equivalent of a James Harden meets Jamal Crawford type. I'm sure the Kings want to keep him. After missing the playoffs, I'm sure they want to keep, one of the best parts of their season. There is, of course, the theory that maybe what he showed is an outlier, right? It was by far the best season of his career, right? And you can make a case that maybe this is not sustainable. Maybe this is one of those things where a guy gets off in a contract year and you're not going to see 1.2 value of a replacement again. Maybe you're not going to see. This is a guy who for 5 years, literally 5 years, posted a negative box plus minus in the last 2 years in the Sacramento Kings offense, and he's going to get paid a pretty penny. I'm personally not as sold on the idea that Malik Monk is this guy, right? Now, you could make a case that he's gotten better every single year. Look at that box plus minus. Just literally go down the list from 19 years old to 25 years old. This could be a guy who is still getting better. At 25 years old, this is a guy who maybe is about to take a step into 2 box plus minus territory, and he has this incredibly valuable skill set of being able to get you late second or late clock, opportunities. He was, I think, third or second in terms of half court assists per game. Like, he was ahead of some of the best passers in the league in terms of his half court offense, and the Raptors really struggled in the half court. So maybe this is a guy, when the offense gets stagnant, he's someone who can put things together for you. He is, however, a pretty bad defender, and I think that showed up. And the Kings have discovered, a gold mine in Keon Ellis, in my opinion, who was incredible for them, and a really good find on a really cheap deal. So if they do bring back Malik Monk, I think Keon Ellis is going to eat into some of his minutes for sure. But okay, the one guy who's been kind of out or shafted in that situation, and maybe if you take him, it frees up the opportunity for them to pay Malik Monk, who I'm sure they would prefer to pay him, and that would be Kevin Huerter. So I am not a person who believes that Kevin Huerter suddenly forgot how to play basketball. Okay. Last year in Atlanta, he was pretty good. And the first year in Sacramento, he was incredible. 61.7% true shooting on a solid movement shooter. His defense is not nearly as bad. My boy Leo likes to harp on his defense, but I don't really think it's that bad personally. He gets deflections. He's a great rebounder for a guard. That really helps if you're playing in transition. He's a really smart player. He's a great movement shooter. In fact, a lot of people compared Grady Dick to him. And so I think, you can make a really solid case that he just had an off year. He had a negative defensive plus minus. He had a negative offensive box plus minus. And hey, this is not a world beater. I'm not suggesting that Kevin Huerter is going to be an all-star, but I am saying that he is worth $17 million potentially, if that $17 million is coming with some sweeteners, which means that in order to give them Bruce Brown and, to give them the cap space, because I don't think Kevin Huerter has a hell of a lot of value right now. People could disagree, but there aren't a lot of contracts like Bruce Brown in the NBA. There aren't a lot of teams that are going to just outright trade for him, in the sense that they're not going to give you like nothing for Kevin Huerter and just absorb 17 million. So you're going to get like a second round pick or something. You're going to be attaching assets to get off of him if you're the Sacramento Kings. And for me personally, I'm curious if the Raptors would explore Bruce Brown for Kevin Huerter, or potentially Jalen McDaniels plus Chris Boucher for Kevin Huerter, because I think that Jalen McDaniels and Chris Boucher fit in a lot better with what the Kings want to do. And maybe in that exchange, because you are giving the Kings something that they value or covet, which is athleticism, length, perimeter defense, etc., which is not necessarily something that you would associate with Kevin Huerter, maybe they'd be willing to attach like a late first round pick or a future first or something of that sort. That may not be very popular with Kings fans, but Kings fans are pretty low on Kevin Huerter, and they seem to consider him to be a bit of a whipping boy, and his regression to be a little bit of a, something that they deem to be a reason for why they struggle this year. So, personally, I think he would fit in really well with what the Raptors are trying to do with their offense. He's already familiar with movement shooting, and I think that he would work really well with guys like Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes. Moving on to Sam Hauser. Oh, Sam Hauser. He was really freaking good this year. I mean, and again, there's a lot of, but with him, right? He's playing on one of the most stacked teams in the league. He is playing a backup role. No one is suggesting that there is some definitive evidence that suggests that he can be this as a starter on not a stacked team. To give you context, he is playing with Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jason Tatum, and basically he's playing with 4 players that are probably better than any player the Raptors had last year. Right? Or at least 3 players. I mean, consider Scotty Barnes in that conversation, but take Scotty out of the equation. The next best Raptor is not better than Derek White, is not better than Drew Holiday, is not better than Kristaps Porzingis. So the talent downgrade would mean more teams get to focus in on him, and he doesn't get as many wide open shots. How is he going to deal with that? There's the additional thing of why did the Celtics want to get rid of him? Why would they ever want to get rid of him? Well, he's an unrestricted free agent, and he is criminally underpaid. And the Celtics are absolutely bloated in terms of I don't know what their risk aversion or how much they want to pay, but I don't think that Sam Hauser is going to take precedence in terms of the priority pecking order over Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. So I do believe that at some point they're going to see the writing on the wall. Brad Stevens is a genius. So he's going to see the writing on the wall and realize, we're going to lose this guy for nothing, because some team out there, he's not a restricted free agent because he wasn't drafted by them. So it's an unrestricted free agent. So because he's an unrestricted free agent, if he gets an offer for $20 million, you don't even have the right to match. He's just going to walk. And you're not going to be able to offer him a starting guard position or a starting wing position because you already have those positions shored up. Derek White is not getting, he's not super old where it's like a situation where a year from now he's going to be old enough for him to age out. You have Peyton Pritchard, who is freaking awesome, who's going to need to get paid as well. So all of these things compound into he might be the odd guy out. You look at a guy like him, you look at a guy like Luke Cornett on that team, and you just say, could they do more? Could they do more elsewhere? Could they be more elsewhere? Or is what they are showing right now a byproduct of them being on such a good team? Because it does help. If you're a smart player, it does help to play with such talent around you. So what would Sam Hauser be away from them? I think he'd still be a really good player. Personally, I've watched enough of him at this point. I really like him, and I think that he would be a solid player. Let's move on to Jonathan Isaac. Now, a guy that I was really pushing for the Raptors to trade for last year. I love him. I think he might be one of the three to 5 best defenders in the NBA. If he can stay healthy, and that's always the big if, right? Can he stay healthy? Well, he was relatively healthy this past year. He has a non-guaranteed contract because he missed so much time. He had 2 back-to-back years in which he had non-guaranteed contracts. I believe his contract is guaranteed $7 million for next year, and then becomes fully guaranteed on January 10th, 2025. So there is a little bit of flexibility for the Raptors where, you trade a Bruce Brown for Jonathan Isaac. You probably have to attach the assets this time around because Jonathan Isaac's a better player. And you commit long-term to this idea that he is going to be a functional part of your, starting unit going forward, in which case you become the biggest team in the NBA. How? Well, number one, he's really developed as a shooter. He's shooting 36 to 40% almost every single year. Granted, not on really high volume, but he's a capable 3-point shooter from the corners, which is great. He offers a tremendous amount of rim protection. He offers a tremendous amount of deflections and disruption. He is a phenomenally versatile player who can guard 4 positions pretty comfortably, even after all the injuries. He gets to the line, which is great. He's relatively efficient for a player his size, 78th percentile in terms of true shooting. It's at 61%, given all the jump shots he takes. He's limited as a passer or creator, but he doesn't need to do any of that. He just needs to be a finisher in your offense. He fits like a fucking glove. Most importantly, this moves Scottie Barnes back into the backcourt. So, I mean, or it moves RJ Barrett back to the backcourt. So there's like one of a few ways to construct this roster. Way number one, and let's just assume that we're going to go in with the assumption that Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scottie Barnes, and Jakob Poeltl are starting come hell or high water. Okay, let's just assume that is the case. Okay, if that is the case, then your fifth starter in that unit is either going to be a guard, a wing, or a forward, right? It's going to be one of those three. It's not going to be a center because you can't play Jakob Poeltl with another center. So it's not going to be Rudy Gobert. It's not going to be, Goga Batiste. It's not going to be one of those guys. So it's going to be either a big, in which case Scottie Barnes becomes a wing, or a guard, right? Or it's going to be a guard, in which case Scottie Barnes becomes a de facto forward. In the event that Scottie Barnes becomes a forward or a big in your lineup, you are now small because Scottie is about 6'8". He is not 6'10". He is not 6'11". I don't care what anyone says. He is firmly 6'8.5-ish. So that's undersized. I mean, he's capable of guarding bigs. We've seen him guard Nikola Jokic. We've seen him guard, and he's getting stronger. But I feel, after watching what the Magic did when, Jonathan Isaac and Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, it's like, my God, they had to put, you had to put Donovan Mitchell on somebody, right? And if the Magic were even capable of exploiting that, like the Raptors could, it's going to help. It does not help, of course, that the Raptors do have now a very small guard in Emmanuel Quickley, who will de facto be the smallest player in most nights. As the league gets bigger and bigger, Emmanuel Quickley is already small. You want to get even smaller by adding like a 6'4" shooting guard next to him? Like, you're going to be one of the smallest teams in the league. So take this problem, and that's your solution. Jonathan Isaac is the solution. He's about 6'10", 7'5" wingspan, 7'4", 7'5" wingspan. I think he might even have a 7'6" wingspan. He makes you one of the biggest teams in the league automatically. He slots in at the 4 perfectly. He shoots. He does not impact your spacing at all. He probably spaces the floor a hell of a lot better than Pascal Siakam ever did. He defends the shit out of the basketball better than Siakam ever did. He gets out of the way. He's really smart. Off ball cuts. He's great, man. Bruce Brown plus stuff is what it's going to take if the Magic were willing to move off of him. I'm not sure they are, but that's why these guys get into now we are in I'm not sure they would get rid of him. You'd have to wow somebody. Vince Williams, honestly, two-way player. I think the offense is a little bit further behind than the defense. Hard to judge what we saw from him, given everything that went on in Memphis this past year with his role and, moving up a level. And, is he going to be a starter? Probably not. He's probably like a wing, but I think he's certainly a better player than what they traded for in Ochai Agbaji. I think he's shown a lot more than him. Analytically, I think he could become one of the top 25 defenders in the NBA someday, very soon. He's not that old, right? He's a pretty young player. Why would the Memphis Grizzlies want to move off of him? I don't know. I really don't know. And that's why we get into this tier of guys where I'm not really sure they're gettable. Vince Williams is one of those guys where I'm not really sure he's gettable. But if he is gettable, you're going to have to give up something to get him. It's not going to be as simple as, okay, Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher and some cap space. You might have to give up like the 19th pick or something like that. And you'd have to, pray that somebody that the Grizzlies really want is there. But I think all of these picks, if the Raptors keep their top 6 pick, whether they get rid of it, that's a different story. But if they keep it, I think that pick should be in play as well. Not for Vince Williams Jr., but for some of the other players that come up on this list, I think that list that could be in play. But when you have the 19th pick, when you have the 31st pick, you always have the opportunity to potentially, especially when you have cap space, to trade that pick for something that's a little bit more ready. The Raptors already did that with Ochai Agbaji. They traded what it amounted to, I think, the 29th or 30th pick, which is the OKC pick, and they traded it for Ochai Agbaji. They pre-did that before the Thunder took the top spot. So in a way, they traded what was the 25th pick at the time for the 30th pick, what is now Ochai Agbaji. So maybe the 19th pick on the day of in that moment when people get really, really excited about, oh my God, this guy that I really like is falling, maybe the 19th pick can get you something. And maybe that something is Vince Williams and a second round pick. I don't know. Maybe. He could be worth it though. Timothe Kaba is definitely worth the 19th pick for me. I was blown away watching him play. His motor, relentless. His absolute versatility is crazy. Gives me a lot of young Pascal Siakam, young OG Anunoby on defense type of stuff. To be this good defensively, for his age, at his age, with his experience, is truly remarkable. He is a very special athlete. I don't know if he'll be a starter in the NBA, but if he works hard, he could be within a couple of years one of the best young players in the NBA. I think the Portland Trailblazers found a steal in him last year, and I don't have a hell of a lot more to say about him. It will take a lot more than probably just the 19th pick. It might take both your picks to get him. At this point, I'm not sure the Portland Trailblazers move off of him regardless. But just somebody to watch out for. Offensively, very limited, at this stage. But again, if you want to have a great, you want to have a great coach, you want to have a great, let's call it like a great development pipeline, you want to have a great development program, it helps to have guys who have the athletic fluidity and potential of a Timothe Kaba, right? Let's move on to also kind of gettable. I debated moving these guys a lot further down on the list because I think they're both pretty gettable. Draymond, the only reason he wouldn't be gettable is largely due to, sentimentality, and does Steph want to play without Draymond, and what does it mean, and does he want to retire, and blah, 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 blah. But he is gettable because in a lot of ways he kind of fucked up the entire Warriors season, right? With his antics and whatever. And I desperately think Draymond Green needs a change of scenery. Another guy who needs a change of scenery is Andrew Wiggins. I think both these guys need a change of scenery in the worst way. I don't think they have a hell of a lot of value. I think they bring championship experience and pedigree to a team and I think they could accelerate whatever the hell the Raptors are trying to do right now in terms of winning. And I'm not really sure that the Warriors are in a position, or in much of a position, to say no to a competitive offer. Now, what would a competitive offer look like? I don't know. I guess it depends on what the hell they're doing with Klay. If they're going to pay Klay Thompson to come back, I think Klay Thompson might truly be washed. But with Andrew Wiggins, I think there remains some semblance of a turnaround. Maybe. You'd have to look at it. Is he the type of guy who will benefit from a change of scenery? Are there personal issues and stuff that have... Ladies and gentlemen, I implore you. Jeez. These guys must not be Raptor fans. All right. Hammer, nail. Stop it, man. 540. Are people supposed to be doing construction at 540? It's annoying because it's right above my head. Okay, I hope they stop, man. I really do. Bro. We are proudly sponsored by Home Hardware. Like, what the fuck is happening? Oh my, okay, I'm just going to talk through this. It's very annoying, but I'm going to try. In terms of Andrew Wiggins, like the version we saw when they won a championship was easily, in my opinion, he was going to be one of the best point of attack defenders that the Raptors have. I think he does a lot of what RJ Barrett does in terms of just fitting into the scheme of being able to be a transition guy. He's a lot smarter than people give him credit for. This is why I like to do lives late at night. I don't know what to do. Should I just play a video? What do I do? Like, I feel kind of helpless in this moment because I can't do anything about this. These guys are lucky I don't like... Anyways, okay. Man, disrupted. Okay. In terms of Draymond Green, I really do think, like, in terms of just as a defensive presence, he still has it. He's so intelligent as a defender. He's so great as a passer, as a hub, as a passer. And we already saw like what benefits the Raptors received from having Jonte Porter on the floor, right? Jonte Porter now disgraced, now banned, et cetera, et cetera. But synergistically, Jonte really fit. Now, Jonte could shoot. Draymond really can't shoot, but Draymond shot pretty okay last year. And honestly, it's not like Jonte was shooting some high volume, and it's not like Draymond is not just a way better rebounder defender than Jonte Porter. He is. To this day, Draymond Green remains one of the best defenders in the NBA. He's in the 100th percentile in terms of Kraft's defensive plus-minus model. He is great in terms of deflections, communication, rim defense, block percentage, everything, man. He is just an elite force on defense. I would argue he's still one of the top 10 defenders in the NBA. He just comes with a lot of baggage. But honestly, some of his baggage it's well-meaning. I definitely think for the most part, he doesn't mean poor. We just live in an age right now where guys like this maybe just have fallen out of fashion. He is like as old school as it gets in terms of just being a no nonsense type of enforcer. And yeah, he's dirty at times. Yes, I will 100% say that. He stepped on people, and I have previously been very critical of players doing that. And so it's kind of weird to advocate for Draymond Green for the second year in a row. But I just think that the Raptors would benefit so much from his defense. And I think that with a coach like Darko, you might believe, for whatever reason, because of the stereotype of, rah American versus, somewhat innocent, wide-eyed European, you might think that Darko can't communicate with a Draymond Green, or he couldn't get him in check. And I think he will. I think he would do a pretty good job. I think the thing with Draymond is you don't bring a guy like that into your locker room unless you are settled on your locker room. If you feel like you have a stability, because he will take over. He will take over so fast. If Fred VanVleet and Dennis Schroeder took over this team, Draymond Green is 20 times those guys, right? So you have to be willing, right? There's no Steph, there's no Steve Kerr, there's no championship pedigree here. He has a blank canvas. He could pout, he could throw a fit, he could punch half your team. I really don't know if you feel secure enough in your culture and organization right now that you would trust bringing in a guy like Draymond Green. But if you did, you'd be a better basketball team immediately on the court. Again, as a screener for Immanuel Quickley, as a release valve. Immanuel Quickley is one of the 20 best shooters in the NBA, in my opinion. Okay. Steph Curry is one of the best shooters, is the best shooter of all time. I'm not comparing these two guys. I am, however, saying that a lot of what Immanuel Quickley can do because of a lot of what Steph Curry has been able to do has been because of what Draymond has done for him. I think he could do a little bit of that, or some version of that, right? It also would help, I think, in terms of defensive IQ and just that sort of like bleed off. Like, when we talk about like bleed off, like, why do people pay money to train with Hakeem Olajuwon? There's an absorption. Draymond is going to be able to teach you stuff that you don't learn from your coaches. And maybe he's going to be able to explain it in a way. And you have a young, impressionable team that might really take to his identity. So whether we're talking Draymond, whether we're talking Marcus Smart, my God, if you added both, holy shit. I got to say, it would be interesting to watch. This team would become immediately a lot more exciting for me if those guys were on. Moving on to Taylor Hendricks. I'm going to buzz through these a little bit more quickly because I assume that this hammering is not going to stop for the next 15 minutes. It's just going to be really annoying, but I do have a few more names on this list, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4 more names. And then we'll quickly take a call from Coach Mo, which is pretty cool. Haven't heard from Coach Mo in a long time. All right, so Taylor Hendricks. Would the Utah Jazz give up on Taylor Hendricks this early? I don't think so. But if they did, maybe it would be for some cap relief. Potentially. You've already dealt with Danny Ainge once. They would have to pretty much not believe in him, which is probably not a good sign if you're the Toronto Raptors. If Danny Ainge chooses to not believe in a player, maybe that's not a good sign. But he was a pretty comprehensible defender as a rookie, which is really hard to do. He is a very good rim protector. He is a really good shot blocker overall. He is versatile as hell. Again, a lot of Pascal Siakam in him. A lot. Offensively, not so much. But he is smart. He works hard. And by the way, I don't know if it helps anybody, but he is known to Scotty Barnes. Like, they know each other and they've known each other for a while. So that would probably help. I think he's a live wire athlete. I think he would really do well in transition. Kind of bummed he didn't fall to the Raptors last year at 13. Personally, I wasn't the highest on him, but I could definitely see like how he would fit. I can still see how he would fit. So maybe this is one of those things that's going to take a little bit more than, Bruce Brown and stuff. It's going to probably take some draft, capital. Um, that being said, if you convey the pick this year, you have plenty of draft capital to trade away, including, 2026 first rounders and 2028 first rounders. You suddenly get all that flexibility back, and maybe Danny Ainge, Trader Danny, would be open to trading multiple firsts for Taylor Hendricks. I don't know if the Raptors would be open to trading multiple firsts for Taylor Hendricks, or if you would be open as a Raptors fan to taking that kind of swing on this type of upside. And maybe it would be the type of thing that would bite you in your ass. But at the same time, I think he is a young player who has a pretty bright future. Dyson Daniels, a player that I just can't stop talking about because I love him so much. But he has not really figured out three-point shooting. He is once again, shot 31% from three. You didn't want to see that in back-to-back years, but once again, 31% from three for a team that already has some serious shooting problems and spacing problems. It does not feel like Dyson Daniels would be the solution offensively, but defensively, he immediately becomes your best defender. Next to Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes, you put Dyson Daniels. Suddenly everything makes sense. Yeah, now you're smaller because long term he's going to be a starter for you. He probably projects as, in my opinion, he's like right on the level of a Grady Dick in terms of long term potential. But he fits so beautifully with how you want to play. He's a great playmaker. Maybe you feel like you have an abundance of primary and secondary initiation. Maybe you feel like he's not good enough a shooter to accentuate and not get in the way of other guys. But I really believe that Dyson Daniels is the type of guy who can blossom into an actual two-way star. Maybe offensively, he won't find it, but he has like that Franz Wagner level upside where he could be a 1 to 2 time all-star. That's what I see in him. And I happen to love the New Orleans Pelicans for that reason. Herb Jones, him, Najee Marshall, Trey Murphy III, who we'll definitely talk about momentarily. I just like all these guys, and I think that they're really good players, and I just don't think that the New Orleans Pelicans can keep all of them. That being said, maybe their plan is keep Dyson Daniels, but at some point, if Dyson Daniels blows up for you, he's going to need to get paid. He's going to get paid a lot of money because I think a lot of smart GMs would really value his defensive analytics. He's one of the best defenders in the NBA right now. It's just that his offense is so far behind. Could the Raptors work on him in terms of skill development? I know he's already working on it. I'm just saying at some point, this guy is going to pop as a shooter. And when he pops as a shooter, he probably will be better than OG Anunoby. Is that crazy to say? OG is one of my favorite players. I'm telling you, Dyson's going to be a better player than OG. So that's a pretty bold stake. I think he has a good chance to be better than OG. Let me put it that way. I think he could be a better player than OG because he has better ball skills, better handle, and overall, he just has better guard skills, and he's a similarly sized level athlete, right? So I don't know. I think it's worth a swing. I don't know if I would give up. I think I might give up the 6th pick if the Raptors end up with the 6th pick and New Orleans wants to start the timeline over. If that'll help them financially long term, I think I could really go through with that. Moving on to Jarris Walker, I really don't think the Indiana Pacers want to trade him. Right? I could debate putting him. I think whether we're talking Taylor Hendricks, whether we're talking Dyson Daniels, whether we're talking Jarris Walker, I think they're all similarly priced guys in terms of like what it would take to get them because they're all lottery picks on their rookie deals. And these guys usually don't get moved this early into their careers. It's very rare. But that being said, is he gettable? Potentially. I don't know. I'm sure the Raptors haggled for him in the Pascal Siakam trade. If they didn't, they're completely ridiculous. But he does a lot of stuff well. He guards really well at the rim. He is extremely versatile. Everything that I said about Taylor Hendricks applies to him, except I think he's a better shooter. His 3-point attempt rate is awesome. He fits in really well with what the Raptors like to do offensively. I really like some of his Mad Ants tape, like watching him in the G League. I think this guy could be in for a boom season, right? Like a boom season. So does Kevin Pritchard already see it? Do they know what they have in him? If so, okay, it's going to take a lot to get him. It's different to have a hypothesis on a person. It's different to have the tape on the person. The good thing is when your hypothesis works out, before the tape shows, you usually get a little bit of a discount on a guy, right? Like, for instance, Jermaine O'Neal, I mean, not to harp on this example because it's Indiana Pacers again, but Jermaine O'Neal in Portland, buried behind Dale Davis, buried behind Rasheed Wallace, buried behind, Arvydas Sabonis and Brian Grant and Sean Kemp, like all the guys that they had, right? I think like he might have moved on before Sean Kemp came. But my point is, when the guy was buried kind of in the depth chart, the way that Jarris Walker is, right? There's probably some internal support for him, maybe some assistant coaches that really think he could be the next big thing, or maybe there's like a person in the front office that really wanted him in the draft and believes he can be a star. But it's different to think a guy could be a star with an expanded role, and you put him in that role, and then he puts 20 points per game and is an elite defender, and you're like, holy shit, this guy might be better than Pascal Siakam. I think he has the upside to be better than Pascal Siakam. That's a pretty bold claim. Pascal Siakam's an all-NBA guy. I think athletically, he's just so interesting. He gets to his spots easy. I think he could be a star, like a star, like a true all-star. I like him better than everyone on this list so far. He is truly incredible athletically. Like, again, it was G League, so I'm watching it, and it was college in Indiana, and in Houston, and I'm watching it. Dude, people do not disrupt this guy's shooting pocket at all. They can't get anywhere near him because he's so strong. He's so physical, and he's so self-aware as a prospect. I think his shooting form is great. I think the Indiana Pacers have a gem in him. I think it offsets some of the lunacy of the Pascal Siakam trade for me. And I think they're going to be a really good team for a really long time because, Tyrese Halliburton is really young. Miles Turner is young enough. Pascal Siakam's young enough. And then you got this guy on the come up who could be better than all of them. Right. And people don't see it. And you have Ben Mathurin, right? The Indiana Pacers, and you have Aaron Nesmith, and, man. Indiana Pacers are a very, very well built team. It's a shame that the Raptors could not get one of those young players. But there's a reason why 2 Indiana Pacers are on this team. It's because, again, when you have parity, right, someone's got to play over somebody else, right? So let's say in a situation where a guy is playing behind Nikola Jokic. Well, you're like, no shit, he's playing behind Nikola Jokic, right? My argument is, how much worse is he than Nikola Jokic? Well, if it's Nikola Jokic, he's probably like half the player or 10th of the player or 20th of the player as Nikola Jokic. But what happens when the starting center isn't Nikola Jokic? What happens when the starting center is just marginally better than the backup? Like, I don't know. Oh, God, good example. Jonas Valanciunas, right? Or Ivica Zubac. Like, what if you're like 5% worse than that guy and you get like 8 minutes a night? You have to identify that. That is the value proposition. That right there. I'm not sure how much worse Jarris Walker is today than Obi Toppin. I'm not sure. Like, I'm sure he is worse because he's younger, but he's definitely not going to be worse. That I'll tell you, 100%. He's not going to be worse than Jaylen Smith. He's not going to be worse than any of these players. Unless something really bad happens for Jarris Walker, I think he can be one of the best forwards in the NBA. So I would trade a top 6 pick for him. Easy peasy. If the Raptors end up with a 3rd pick, I would trade it for Jarris Walker. Maybe. Probably. Unless I fell in love with a prospect, because, there is the advantage of drafting the player because then you get the extra year on the rookie deal. But I think a better question is, if Jarris Walker was in this draft, would he be the number 1 pick? After 1 more year in Houston, he probably would be the number 1 pick. So keep that in mind when I say trading a top 3 pick for a guy who didn't play last year or very, very little play, played very little. He played a grand total of 340 minutes, right? And he managed a 0.2 value of replacement. He managed a positive 0.2 boxes minus. Consider what the fuck he just did at the age of 20, man. Like, a positive boxes minus and positive value of replacement. Like, the fact that he is not playing, Jose Calderon saying he's better than everyone in this draft. Pacers wouldn't do that. I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't. That's probably true. Maybe they wouldn't. But I'm saying, well, there's a reason why he's 14th out of 15 guys in terms of gettability on this list. All right, and the final guy. I would trade the heaven and earth to get this guy on this team. He would immediately become my second building block piece next to Scotty Barnes, and that is Trey Murphy III. I might be his biggest fan in the world. I think he is just so good, so smart. His intelligence is what is so baffling. His fluidity, his defensive versatility, his overall well-roundedness as a player, even though his ball creation is probably still a year away from coming true to him. Um, he has just been on a heater. He gets better every single year. This guy's going to be an all-star. In my opinion, he will be an all-star. But they have a lot of money tied up in Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram, and they give up a lot. They would give up a lot of shot creation by replacing him with one of those guys, or replace one of those guys with him. And so I understand that at some point they're going to have to pay this guy. He is part of Scotty's draft class, so he is extension eligible this summer. If they extend him as a small market team with Zion on the books, with Brandon Ingram on the books, that is now 3 near max probably players. If his agent takes less than $30 million a year, his agent has done him a great disservice, because there is some team out there that needs him badly enough to pay $30+ million. So I would have traded OG for him straight up in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. I would have traded Pascal for him straight up 2 years ago in a heartbeat. He is a very good young player. That being said, maybe the fact that the New Orleans Pelicans got swept means that for a small market team, they have to make changes. Maybe that means that, okay, they could sell themselves on, well, if Zion had played, we would have been more competitive in that series. But when is Zion going to be healthy long term? At some point, the clock does run out on this. At some point, you are a small market team. At some point, you are going to have to pay for this core, this young core. And that's why I look at teams like this, teams like Orlando, teams like, OKC, and I say, okay, great. You have all these young players. They're really good, et cetera, et cetera. But what happens when you actually have to pay them? It's the same thing that happened with OKC. When they're a small market team and they're not willing, and they haven't shown you, they're not Matt Ishbia's Suns. They're not Steve Ballmer's Clippers, where they're just like, money is no object. We don't care. We'll bleed money for years. They're not the Golden State Warriors, where they're willing to pay. The funny thing about the Golden State Warriors, I think they played 60. I think they, with luxury tax payments, I think they paid close to $80 million for Kelly Oubre. The Sixers just paid $2 million for Kelly Oubre. That's 3 years later. So again, there are certain teams out there that have shown that they are not willing to go into the luxury tax, and you're going to have to capitalize that one of those teams is going to have to let go of someone who's really freaking good, and you're one of the few teams that has prepped yourself to be able to scoop one of those guys up. And maybe it would be very beneficial if, for the Pelicans, yeah, he's a hell of a talent, but maybe a top 3 pick is enough, because the top 3 pick is not going to be paid $30 million for another 4 years, right? So you take that top 3 pick and you start dangling it, and you say, okay, we are in a different place right now. Yeah, it would be great for the Raptors to have a top 3 pick that actually becomes as good as Trey Murphy III. It is very unlikely that the top 3 pick in this draft is going to be better than Trey Murphy III. And so because of that, I say, are you further along where you can take a guy who's 24 years old and pair him with the other guys on the team? Imagine this following team: Scotty Barnes, Trey Murphy III, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, Jakob Poeltl. Is that a tough out in the first round? I think so. And I think it fits synergistically. He's a great shooter. He's a sniper. He could be one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. He is one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA. Butter smooth jumper release. I think he fits so well with what the Raptors have to do, man. I would trade a lot for him. I really would. So yeah, that ends that. And just I'll keep this up as we bring Coach Mo on. But yeah, this is just to give you a context of where these players sit in various metrics, right? To give you an idea. So 3-point shooting, Trey Murphy III, 38%. That does not really account for how many threes he takes. But you can look at a guy like a Herb Jones, right? He's we didn't talk about him because I don't really think he's gettable because he's on such a reasonable contract. But man, I would probably trade the 6th pick for Herb Jones on that contract. And he shoots 42%, and he's shown a lot more as a playmaker. Alex Caruso, he's on a pretty reasonable deal as well. probably gonna be really hard to get. Andrew Wiggins, of course, like the worst at everything, but compared it all to OG Anunoby, don't sleep on that outcome. Potentially, OG Anunoby, I realize it becomes more and more unlikely as he continues to gel with his new Knick teammates, but maybe, just maybe, OG is someone who could be gettable for $35 million. We'll see. Okay, let's bring on Coach Mo as our final thing. Coach Mo, what is going on, man?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. What's up?
It was a great list, but I think the player that we get, it has to, unless we get like Dyson Daniels for like discount, I think it has to be somebody with size 6'8", 6'9". I think because Oche,
Dyson's about 6'7", and he has a pretty long wingspan.
no, him I like, but it's like I like Jonathan Isaac. That was a great one. I also was thinking of like, I don't know, Patrick Williams. I think if you can get him for cheap because he has size and versatility. I'm just thinking
Williams?
Yeah, Patrick Williams from the Bulls. I think
He's extension eligible.
Is he? Okay, well, we'll see what happens with him. But it's someone with
Bro,
that
he
size.
wants crazy amounts of money. I think he was talking like $35 million a year. He might be worth 13.
He's dreaming. He's not getting that. But
yeah, but that's my point. It's like, so isn't that a red flag for me that a guy who's worth $15 million to $20 million on the freaking maximum? I'm talking like when I talk about like what a guy's worth, right? Like I look at it the same way as stocks, right? How much do you know about stocks? Just curious. A lot. Like 0, never heard of a stock. 10, you trade on Wall Street tomorrow. Where are you at?
I don't know. I've traded before.
Okay, so you're like 6. Okay, so let's assume 6, 7. You know that certain stocks have expectations built into them, like Tesla. Before Tesla made a dime, Tesla was worth a ton of money.
Yes.
Apple, Amazon, all of these tech stocks have a ton of what you call like upside. Well, not necessarily blue chip, but like they're upside stocks in the sense that there's an expectation of growth baked into the valuation. The EV is not correct. So when it comes to young players, right? Like I don't know, a Scotty Barnes. Like we didn't trade Scotty Barnes for Kevin Durant. That was not a statement that Scotty Barnes is a better player than Kevin Durant. It's a statement that we expect him one day to be comparable, or he's going to be on that level. So when you look at a guy like a Patrick Williams, there's a certain amount of that money that's going to come to him, or if you're trading for him, a certain amount of the valuation that you're going to give out for him is going to be because you believe in the player he can be, until of course he turns 27 and everyone's like, oh, nah, he never became it. But even if you factor in upside, $30 million.
Who's still banking on Patrick Williams upside? Who's still doing that?
Him, apparently.
Because
I don't know, somebody, because he refused the extension offer from the Bulls, and now he's gonna hit restricted free agency. So if the Raptors want him, they don't have to trade shit for him. They can just make an offer. They can. But I mean, like, what are you willing to offer on the open market for Patrick Williams? Would you offer $90 million over 4 years?
Let me put it to you this way: if you just replaced him with Gary Trent Jr., how much better would we be this year?
I think you might be worse.
You think we'd be worse?
I don't know, because Gary Trent Jr. is one of the best shooters in the NBA, bro. And you don't have a lot of shooting.
He had a pretty decent jump shot, statistically speaking. His threes.
On what volume?
Yeah, well.
And what kind of shooting? Like that I think is also worth saying, right? Like Gary has like self-created.
He shot 40% from 3, 39.9. And the
volume fair.
The volume was 3.4 attempts a game.
That's terrible.
I just really feel like we need a player that has the size to, like, kind of like Scotty or OG or Pascal, where it's like they can play a big at times, but they also they have guard skills. Because when we go small, no big on the floor, it gets pretty bleak after Scotty. Right? So playing small ball in the modern game, it's like you have Scotty can be the 4 or the 5, but you need another guy who can play the 4 or the 5. You can't literally have Scotty and then guards, because there's just so much versatile size in the league. And we went from, Project 6'9" to there's just one guy left, wondering where everyone is.
Right. Here's a I don't know if people can see this, but this is Patrick Williams versus Gary Trent Jr. in terms of like just a cross comparison. And this is not factoring in that Patrick Williams gets like a very different diet of 3-point shots in terms of creation and stuff.
He doesn't need to create. If the idea is Grady becomes a better creator, because Grady can even improve in that area where he makes quick reads and he had some passing chops. And then obviously you have Scotty, RJ, and IQ. I just think you need size. Because, I mean, Abaji, Gary, IQ, RJ, it's just
so
like
here's the thing.
Everywhere.
Like, you have to do it by aggregate. When it comes to 3-point shooting, rebounding, whatever, to me, it's all by aggregate, and aggregate comes down to rate. In terms of shooting, just to compare this Gary Trent Jr. versus Patrick Williams, because some people are going to get lost in the weeds and say, hey, one guy shoots 40%, the other guy shoots 40%, 39.9 versus 39.3. Maybe Patrick Williams is a better shooter. But hey, 11 attempts per game from three for Gary on high volume. And a lot of them were self-generated. It wasn't all catch and shoot shit where other people are generating it for you. Those self-generated threes, those step-back threes, those dribble pull-up threes are worth a hell of a lot more to me, especially, by the way, above the break threes. Like, I think we need to stop thinking of 3-point shooting or three-pointers as, okay, this guy's a 29% three-point shooter, this guy's a 32% three-point shooter. I think we need to look at it as what types of threes you get versus how important that is for the general scheme of what you're trying to do. Like, I care that a guy can catch and shoot from the corner, like an OG Anunoby, right? Like, OG Anunoby is a great example. What is OG's percentage if you make him if you put a hand in his face on threes right now? It's terrible, right? So can you make contested threes? Because if you can't make contested threes, you are suddenly way easier to guard, right? If you can't make a three, if you put the ball on the floor, that's why Trey Murphy is so impressive to me, is he can put the ball on the floor and still make the three. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I look at Paul George, James Harden. Like, these guys, they generate a lot of their own threes. That's different than a guy who stands in a corner like a Jonathan Isaac and just shoots threes and he's open and he makes them, right? Like Marc Gasol. Marc Gasol could catch and shoot 29 to 32% from three. It's serviceable. It's better than a guy who can't shoot threes at all, but it's certainly not Joel Embiid. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that guy. So I just think like volume matters. I think the type of threes you're taking matters. And I think if the Raptors are going to, get better, they need guys who do stuff that they lacked. Point of attack defense specifically, shot creation, like a Malik Monk. What do you think of Malik Monk?
I really like Malik Monk, but I think size is the most important thing we need. We need versatile size because we already have two bigs. We have this starting center. We have the backup center.
Right.
We have a litany of guards, whether you think they're good or not. We have Grady.
Could you play them together though? Could you play Jakob and Kelly together, you think? We don't really see much of it.
And Scotty?
Yeah. So like, I mean, Kelly stretches the floor, right? You become huge if you play that lineup. And I'm very curious to see it. Like, imagine the lineup of Emmanuel Quickley, RJ Barrett, Scotty Barnes, Jakob Poeltl, and Kelly Olynyk. Could that work in spurts?
I mean, it could, yeah. It depends. Like, that would be to match up with the other team or make them match us.
I don't think Kelly operates well enough in the post to like punish. So I would, like, if I'm an opposing team, probably, unless Scotty develops a massively better bag, I'd probably put my 4 on Scotty and put my 3 on Kelly.
Yeah.
And that makes it easier. And that's kind of my point, right? Like, I think the Raptors didn't put enough pressure on other teams this year in terms of how hard they were to guard, like with Fred, initially with Fred and Jakob, like that pick and roll, it wasn't hard to guard. They just played a lot of really shit teams, and they would have found out, like, a lot of people like to romanticize that period of time, not realizing we played a lot of really bad teams.
Yeah.
But had they gone to the playoffs, I think that entire play would have been exposed. Jakob Poeltl is not hard to guard. He's just not hard to guard. He's a very, very predictable player. So to make up for that, not being said, is a very valuable player. Like, what he does is very valuable. It's just not hard to stop, because once you scheme for it, there's nothing he can do to counter it. It's not like, oh, we're going to play, aggressive drop with Jakob Poeltl, and then suddenly he's going to start popping off for 3. He's not going to be able to do that. So he can't punish a defense that plays him to his weaknesses. And so that where I say like the counterbalance is you must have an abundance of players that can punish that, which means, Emmanuel quickly needs to become better at finishing at the rim, to create that threat, right? And so like, yeah, I understand like from the Raptors position, like it's about putting a square peg into a round hole where you're trying to shore up some of your weaknesses, but it would really, really help if you got some massive talents. Like, is there a player that I didn't list that you would look at? Apart from Patrick Williams.
Jonathan Isaac, I really like. What are your thoughts on? He's obviously had a horrible end to the playoffs, but a stopgap vet, Tobias Harris, if you can get him for cheap.
Is he expiring? He is expiring.
It's done. It's done. He's a free agent.
Oh yeah,
and he has the size and versatility that he can be a closing lineup guy, right?
Right.
Or he can give you a solid 25 minutes. I'm just looking at this roster right now when it's like, who's your definitive closers? Besides the big three, like who are the other two that you're going to close the game to? That you're going to close the game with? Like who? Because Jakob is not 100%. I'm closing with him, right?
Okay. Well, if he's not, you're going to have a massive hole defensively on the inside, right? But that being said, like Tobias Harris is massively underrated because I think the reputation of him being overpaid somewhat overshadows the player that he is, right? I think of him like an undersized 4, as opposed to like an oversized 3. In terms of shot quality, he's in a 79th percentile. In terms of passer rating, he's just a very well-rounded player. Defensively, he's actually a bit underrated because he's such a good rebounder. And his, like I think he's defensively, like people may not want to hear this. He's not that far off from Pascal Siakam.
I agree. And
he's not a bad defender. He's not a good defender. He can float. Like he can be a part of a good defensive team. Now, how much of that is being anchored by the fact that he played with Joel Embiid? I don't know, but he's been a bad defender in the past.
Yeah, he's also he'd be like a positive vet. Like he's a good team player.
Sure,
he's like a good guy. No.
How much would you pay for him? Like 15 to 20 million a year, or that kind of deal?
Yeah, I'd give him like 2 years, 20 million.
2 years, 20 million a year, or 2 years, 20 million total?
2 years, 20 million a year.
Okay.
And I think I think he's much better than Gary. I think he's a much better player than Gary.
Does it scare you that he's 31 years old and players like him typically age really horribly into the 30s?
I don't think he's going to age horribly in the next couple of years because I don't think his game is predicated on quickness.
That's true.
He has really good post game. He's a solid. He's very skilled and he's a really good shooter. And he's already used to playing off other players, and he's going to play off our big three.
Well, here's my concern with him. How does he fit with a big who can't shoot and a small forward and shooting guard whose biggest question marks are jump shooting? Because this is a guy who I think operates really, really well in the low block. Like if I could put Tobias Harris anywhere on the court, it would be the pinch post, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But that's also exactly where I put Scotty Barnes. It's exactly where I put RJ Barrett. So you have 3 players who occupy exactly the same place on the court. And on top of it, he's not a lights out spot up shooter. So he doesn't create as much space for those guys in theory as someone like a Sam Hauser or a Kevin Huerter or someone like that. He's not offering much defense. Like he's okay defensively, not a great defender. So I think like he's a specialist at something you already specialize in, which is pinch post, playmaking, scoring. And he's a worse playmaker than Scotty Barnes by far.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, he would be anchoring a second unit without those guys to float your offense. Yes. But are you willing to pay $20 million for a 31-year-old, 32-year-old next year?
He's just a stopgap. He's just a stopgap. It's not a long-term solution. But if you plan on being competitive next year, you need to fill holes on the roster.
Okay. But right? What are you losing from this year that you feel like, okay,
what's he taking away from? That's the question.
I think it's taking away from, okay, like $20 million is a lot of money. That's what I'm looking at. Like, I think $20 million is a significant chunk of change. And maybe the $20 million could be like, here's the thing. I don't think he necessarily fits the way the Raptors like to play, which is a lot of off-ball cutting. Center is open, like especially with that second unit. Noticing like how they played with Kelly Olynyk and how they played with Jonte Porter. They like to play 5 out. They like to play transition. I don't necessarily think those are like the strengths of Tobias' game. Tobias is like a half-court scorer, so he does shore up one of your biggest weaknesses. But I kind of wonder philosophically if Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are like, we want to fill one of our biggest weaknesses, which is stable half court offense for our second unit, or do you want to double down on your strengths, which is get more transition players, more versatile defenders? You know what I mean? Like, are you trying to, like, it would be like a transition, like a really good half court team, like saying we want like a really great run jump athlete so that we can play a little bit of transition. It's like, do you want to be, it's almost like you're going against type. He doesn't fit, but I see why you want him, because it's precisely because you don't have anything like him, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like having
it's also like a talent influx because
he's definitely more talented than whatever the hell he would be replacing.
Yeah.
I get the talent equation. I just worry that maybe his timeline, you say stopgap, 31 years old. I advocated for Draymond Green, who's definitely in the same age group, right? So I understand
real spacing issues because Jakob can't shoot, and Scotty, and you can argue Scotty and RJ's jump shot is questionable. You know,
is Jakob Poeltl on this team on the first day of training camp?
Yes, he is.
100%.
I mean, it's not easy to get off him. I don't think unless you get unless you keep your pick and it's like top 4.
Okay,
like you're gonna have to clump him with something.
Let me pitch a deal and let's see if you take it. You're Golden State. I'm Toronto. Okay, I offer you Jakob Poeltl, Bruce Brown, and Chris Boucher for Andrew Wiggins and Draymond Green. Do you take it?
Who the hell's our center?
Draymond Green.
So we have no traditional lumbering big no more.
Nope.
It's not on the roster.
Nope. I mean, I don't know if you consider Kelly Olynyk lumbering. He's not lumbering.
No, he's not. Like who are you gonna throw at Joel Embiid?
Bro, I think Draymond Green has a better shot at guarding Joel Embiid than Jakob Poeltl.
No, I agree. Would I do that? I actually would do that. Hold on, let me see. How long are their deals? How long are those Warriors?
It's not pretty. It's not pretty.
Let me see.
It's pretty ugly, actually. I would probably want some.
Wow! Oh my goodness!
Oh, exactly. So that is
they are going to pick up.
Oh yeah.
2026, 2027 is when they're no. I need something.
Oh yeah. So you might have to take like you might beg and plead to get a Moses Moody and exchange it for like your 19th pick or something like that. I get the point. But I'm saying like you're getting off of Jakob Poeltl, who frankly is probably going to age not so great.
And Draymond's going to age well?
He's just so smart, bro.
He is. And
he's so smart.
Jakob's no dummy.
Jakob's no dummy, and size ages better than skill. But I do think like at some point, you know, I also thought that maybe Jakob Poeltl didn't want to be here. I got that feeling last year. I'm not necessarily sure Draymond Green will want to be here either.
I just feel like you're trading one bad contract
for two
undesirable ones that end at the same time. It's like you'll be like the Raptors are going to throw a pizza party when Jakob Poeltl deals ends. Now they're stuck with 2 that they'll have to throw a pizza party when they end.
Well, I mean, therein lies the conundrum. I said if I was the Raptors and you were the Warriors, would you do this? And you said as the Warriors, you would consider it. So that's my point. It's like why for the Warriors too, right?
I'm on that. If I'm on the Warriors, I jump on that so fast.
I'm not sure they do. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, again, like they had a really bad year. There's a lot of stock decline for those guys right now, right? But I'm just saying, like, these are two guys who you could argue were the second and third best players on a championship team 2 years ago.
Yeah.
2 years. Right? That's not that far. 2 years ago. Now you could say, okay, well, 2 years ago, Kyle Lowry was like the best player, whatever, 2 years ago. Well, not the best player, but 2 years is a long time. It's a 700 plus days. It's a long time. But if you truly believe that it's just the situation has staled and maybe a change of scenery, certainly there are worse players. I don't think you're losing much in Chris Boucher. I definitely don't think you're losing much in Bruce Brown. And Jakob Poeltl is, I don't think it's a good asset. I think he's worth 12 million to 13 million max. Yeah. That being said, I do think Jakob Poeltl is a very good defender. I would be perfectly fine keeping him. So okay, amend the deal. Would you trade Bruce Brown and Chris Boucher for Andrew Wiggins and Moses Moody?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so would I. So that therein lies, I think, where the Raptors have, and let's throw Jaylen McDaniels in that trade too. You give them expiring contracts across the board. So the Raptors have 3 very tradable expiring contracts, all attached to players that have no business being a part of their future, right? And Chris Boucher, right. So I mean, that's a pretty sizable haul. Chris Boucher makes $12 million a year. Bruce Brown's at like 20. So you got already like 32 right there. You get adding Jaylen McDaniels. You can take Zach LaVine back if you really want him. I don't want him, but you could take Bradley Beal. You could take a lot of things, and that's one way that you could use that cap space. And the other team on the other end would have $37 million coming back, one of which is immediately waive him, and you lose nothing because his contract's not guaranteed. And then boom, you got Chris Boucher and Jaylen McDaniels as expiring contracts at the trade deadline next year that you could probably swing for something more valuable. On the alternate, the Raptors could allow Bruce Brown, right, to for his contract to guarantee, and then you could potentially have $37 million of trade expiring contracts yourself to trade throughout the year. If you see another step from Scotty and another step from Manuel quickly, and you're like, oh shit, and things start to hit the fan in Golden State, do you swing for the fences then? But Masai Ujiri is already on the record saying he prefers to make these deals in the off season. So that being said, get ahead of it. Trust in your player development. Trust that Emmanuel Quickley and Scotty Barnes and RJ Barrett are going to get better, and start putting a competitive, sort of veteran laden group around them right now.
I agree. Our only hope to be good next year is for Scotty to ascend further offensively, right? We're going to need him to be like really good offensive player. And for that to happen, this on-ball primary defender thing, if he's that, we have no shot. If Scotty Barnes is exerting the effort he was exerting on the defensive end after OG was traded, we're cooked. We're going nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. We're going to be horrible. Because he's that important. Because after that, it's RJ and IQ, and they're not nearly the creator and the disruptor Scotty Barnes is for other teams. They need someone to take the OG role. If Scotty Barnes comes into training camp as the best defender, the best wing defender, it's over, bro. Honestly, it's over.
Yeah, I think the Raptors are like one piece. There's like one piece missing. And I'm wondering if they can take all these expirings and all these picks and convey it into that one piece. It has to be a really good piece. It has to be Trey Murphy the third level type of piece, right? But if it's not one piece, could you do it by 2 pieces? Could you do it through an Andrew Wiggins and a Draymond Green? Because I'll tell you right now, as terrible a season as Andrew Wiggins had, if you take the personal issues aside, he is probably the best point of attack defender on this team tomorrow.
Yes, he is.
And Draymond Green, for all of the off-court issues and everything that has happened with him, he does play in the Western Conference, which is significantly larger, and he's dealing with just much better players on a night-to-night basis. There is an exchange rate between the West and the East that I don't think people factor that in properly. You are as good as the players you play against on a night-to-night basis. If every night you had to face the Chicago Bulls, 96 Chicago Bulls, imagine there's a season in which Scotty Barnes had to face the Chicago Bulls every single night for 82 games. His fucking stats would be terrible, right? So you have to look at the relative competition on the West versus the East and say, well, you're a team in the East, they're a team in the West. This might make sense to trade with teams in the West and start trading. And if other GMs don't think this way, maybe take into account the fact that a player in the West who is doing kind of okay might do a lot better in the East, where there's a lot less size and a lot less physicality and frankly a lot less fucking talent on a night-to-night basis, just on an aggregate level, right? Because the sum total of 82 games, if you're playing in the East, at least 30 of those games are against subpar competition that the West is never going to have. Those 30 games it makes a difference. It's a 30 extra wins. That's why I look at a team like Cleveland and I'm like, Cleveland isn't making the fucking playoffs in the West. Indiana wouldn't even fucking sniff the play-in in the West. Would you? Like, I think Houston's probably better than Indiana right now. I think they're close. Like healthy Houston versus healthy Indiana. I think I might take healthy Houston in a series.
Yeah, I would too.
Houston didn't even make the fucking play-in. That's what I was telling my friend Leo, for the Sacramento Kings. I was like, bro, I think the Sacramento Kings would be like the second seed in the East. Like they might be.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just like Domantas Sabonis on a night tonight. Who the fuck is dealing with that? De'Aaron Fox? Keegan Murray? Like Malik Monk? Shit. You're telling me that team couldn't beat the Philadelphia 76ers, but probably could. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I think there is a significant exchange rate when it comes to East and West. And that's why I see like a guy like Draymond and
that's why we're
Andrew Wiggins.
That's why we're fortunate to be in the East. There's opportunity.
There is opportunity.
If we were in the West, there is no opportunity.
And Wemby and Chet are in the West.
Yeah.
So not only are the existing great teams in the West, all the young talent, Anthony Edwards, Victor Wembanyama, and Chet Holmgren. And who do the East have? Paolo Banchero and Cade Cunningham. Are you kidding me?
I know.
Like, this hasn't even come close to the gap that it's gonna be. Like, they're lucky that they're realigning the league in a few years, in which probably Minnesota or Memphis, one of those teams, is going to come East. And I'm really hoping it's Memphis because I really don't want Minnesota in the East. But it probably will be Minnesota.
I want to reiterate this. Scotty Barnes has 25, 8-8 in him next year, right? I don't even think that's a stretch to even believe. But if Ochai Agbaji is the next best defender after Scotty,
he's not, though. Jakob is the best defender on this team.
Not
wing,
non-big. If Ochai Agbaji is still the second best non-big defender on the team next year, it's not happening.
Right.
Because that dude's borderline unplayable the way he's been shooting.
I wonder if the Raptors will get a surprise development from either Ochai. Like, I think of it like taking like a 30-1 bet, like on a 3-leg parlay. It's not likely that it's going to hit, but man, when it hits, right? Ochai Agbaji has the athletic potential to be a very good player, right? Like in the NBA, he has the transition, he has a straight line drive, he has the first step. He just hasn't been able to put it together mentally, which I'm wondering is more of like he clearly cares. Yeah, I've never received any. He tries really hard. I don't think effort was an issue at all. So what is this missing dot that's just missing from his equation? That I'm curious about. If he can put it together, I wonder if, the Raptors even have this problem, because, all this talk about Marcus Smart and whatever, it's largely because they can't defend the point of attack. Mm-hmm. Could he become a slightly muted version of a Jalen Suggs? I freaking doubt it, but athletically he has the potential to.
So he would start then in that case if he just has this.
I think okay, so here's a question. Do you start Grady Dick next year? Personally, I don't want to. And I hear a lot of people saying that they want to start Grady Dick because he's a part of the future and whatever. And it's like, yeah, then do that in the future. But I think you're actually doing him a disservice by starting him because you don't have enough defense in that lineup to protect him.
Was Gary starting before the injuries? Was Gary starting? Like who? What was the starting lineup? It was Gary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If Agbaji was anything close to what he could be, and we started him in place of Gary, I think we would have been actually pretty good. That would have been a more balanced starting lineup. If he could defend and make threes at a decent rate, I think that would have been a more balanced starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't need to do too much, right?
No,
Like if he could just study some Jonathan Isaac tape, he could be like a really, really small Jonathan Isaac, like in terms of offensive role, just cut to the basket, smart cuts. He played in Kansas. That's a very, NBA nurturing type of offense. He won a national championship as their best player. Like he's got the pedigree, there's a reason the Raptors bought on the upside. There's also a reason, however, that Danny Ainge sold on the downside. Right. So I wasn't impressed with what I saw from him. I expected more, but I wonder, does he have it in him to be Aaron Nesmith? Could he be that good? Ironically, I think they were both 14th overall picks as well. I don't remember that for sure, but I think Aaron Nesmith was a 14th overall pick as well. It would be great. It would be like such a home run for the Raptors if Ochai Agbaji works out. It would also be a huge home run if RJ Barrett actually becomes a good defender, because he was not this year at all.
I'm not banking on that. You can't bank on that. And for
what's he missing though? What is he missing? I find it really hard. Like with Scotty, the point of attack stuff is pretty obvious. He has really high hips and, he has some mobility issues in terms of like moving east-west. I get that. Even though he has a million other positive qualities, I understand why I wouldn't necessarily want to put Scotty Barnes on John Morant. I get that, even though he wants to guard John Morant, and kudos to him, but I get why I wouldn't put him on him. That being said, what is RJ Barrett lacking? He doesn't have the high hips necessarily. He is very athletic, albeit not a freakish athlete, but I mean, there's a lot of defenders out there that are not freakish athletes. Klay Thompson's not a freakish athlete. What is he missing?
Isn't RJ the same type of athlete DeMar was?
I think DeMar was a better athlete.
Because DeMar, it was like sometimes he jumps and you're like, whoa, okay. DeMar has like that one dunk every year where it reminds you, oh yeah, this dude was in the dunk contest. But the rest of the time, he's below the rim. He's a below the rim athlete for the most part.
But I don't think you need to be an above the rim athlete to be a great defender. Fred VanVleet's a great defender. He can barely dunk.
But I never like. Did you feel like DeMar moved great laterally on defense?
No,
he didn't.
But what's interesting? One player in Raptors history who did move great laterally, Vince Carter, phenomenal. Tracy McGrady, phenomenal. Those guys moved great laterally. They weren't good defenders either. I think Tracy was a little bit better than Vince, but Vince wasn't a great defender. So I think at some point it's just buy-in, IQ, effort. I think these things have to matter. If RJ Barrett really, really, really just honed in on that and said, I'm going to become the best defender in the NBA. I mean, he won't, but does he at 6'9" wingspan, 6'6.5" with his body build, etc., could he be capable, bro?
I think he's capable. Yeah. I don't think he can cut off like drives consistently. Like his lateral movement isn't the greatest. He's more power. He's more strength, right?
Well, at 23 years old, is there enough that he can do to change his body so that he can become a little bit better laterally, right? Because the body is a little bit more flexible at this age, I feel, like in terms of changes that you want to implement. So if the Raptors want to increase his foot speed a little bit, because I mean, on offense, all of the things that we're talking about in terms of like first step, coordination, he's showing a lot of that. But he didn't become the number one ranked player in America, as a high schooler by not being athletic. He was athletic.
He's not like Anthony Edwards is beating people off the dribble clean. RJ more so bulldozes his way in. Like RJ does a lot of bully ball.
Yeah.
Right. And when he does blow by people, he catches it and drives. Right. He attacks the shifting defense and he attacks the gap pretty quick. Right. But he's not beating people off the dribble, with a first step. It's not Vince Carter stuff where it's like, you look at the court and you say, I can't keep him in front of me. I just can't do it.
Is Jalen Suggs beating people off the dribble Vince Carter style? He's one of the best defenders in the league. Is Jaden McDaniels beating guys off the dribble? Is OG Anunoby beating guys off the dribble? No. That's what I'm saying. How different an athlete are OG and RJ? Like if you put them side to side and ask them to move around the court, I mean, the one clear advantage is OG has a massive reach advantage. He has a massive strength advantage. He's a bigger athlete. So OG is a much bigger version of RJ Barrett in terms of an athlete. But RJ is more coordinated.
I agree.
Offensively, at least.
So where does defensive IQ come in?
I think therein lies the point, is that in terms of anticipation, and commitment, right? If Fred VanVleet can become a great defender in the NBA, I don't want to hear shit from anybody, because if that guy can do it, anybody can do it. It does require study.
That dude has like 99 percentile hands.
Yes, he does. And he has great lateral quickness, and he worked really freaking hard. So RJ Barrett, he talked about, I'm not OG Anunoby defensively, really big shoes to fill, etc. But he wants to be a great defender. That's good. It's good if he wants to be. He's far from a great defender. But man, if between him, Scotty, and Ochai, and Emmanuel Quickley and Grady Dick, if they can all get 5% better defensively, I don't think we're talking about this as a big problem next year.
But they have to watch tape. That's what OG does. He watches film and tendencies. Like, you don't just get on the court and say, okay, I'm going to be a good defender today. Did you study your matchup? Do you know what he likes to do? Like, you can't just say, yeah, today I'm going to defend my ass off. It doesn't work that way. These guys are too good. You have to know what they're doing. You have to know percentages. You can't just will your way into good defense the same way you can't will your way into good offense. You have to practice.
Yeah. Leo Getz is losing his mind in the chat here. Masai Ujiri said rebuilds can be 6 years long. Did he say that? I don't remember that. I'm being sarcastic about the Raptors getting free agents. The reality of free agents coming to Toronto is as likely as LeBron James coming to Toronto in free agency willingly. Oh boy. Pensari hot takes are stupid and remind me of a used car salesman mentality who tries to sell you lemon, tries to act intelligent, but is in reality a fraud. I am out of here. Good luck. Man, I think I speak for a lot of people when I say do not let the door hit you on the way out, man. You sound really, really, really dumb. Holy shit. Like, if we got possibly the dumbest person in the world.
If we got Isaac, though, that'd be an amazing. Like, I feel like that one's gettable.
Who?
Like, Trey Murphy the third's not gettable. I don't think that's a pipe dream. But Isaac's gettable.
Facts. Yeah. Okay, so the only reason I say that Trey Murphy might be gettable, and I'm not saying he's gettable for scraps. I'm saying he's gettable for a lion's share package.
Yes.
And maybe the lion's share package is the second overall pick if you're lucky enough to get into, a second overall pick. If you convey the pick, maybe the lion's share packages, multiple first round picks, future soft protection. Someone saying, do you like Rui? We can get him for Bruce. No. I don't like Rui Hachimura.
No.
At all. Would you like Jared Vanderbilt?
I do like Jared Vanderbilt. But he has to like, the coaching staff has to encourage him to shoot those corner threes. He has
He's young enough where he still might figure it out. I look at guys like Jared Vanderbilt. I look at guys like Cam Reddish. I look at a lot of guys where I'm like, again, you have to see something that they haven't shown yet, and you have to believe that you can get out of them. And that's always a risky game. I mean, that's the same game you're playing with RJ, Emmanuel Quickley. You're playing that game with all these guys, right? Where you're expecting them to do something more than what they've done, right? RJ Barrett has not been an offensive initiator necessarily for the New York Knicks. Oh, we got FA coming on too. Okay, guys, I gotta caution this. We're 10 minutes and we're out. I gotta watch the Knicks Pacers. But what's going on, FA? What's going on?
Hey guys, I was listening. I was in a meeting, so my meeting just ended at work. So let me join you guys and just. How's it going?
It's going well. Let's shift focus for a second. Prediction on Indiana versus New York. Any thoughts?
I saw your stuff on Twitter and I didn't vote because you didn't give Indiana any chance.
Bro, so those of you who do not follow Pensari Biwa on Twitter, I literally said predictions for. So my first post was predictions for Minnesota versus Denver, and obviously I'm rooting for Denver. I'm big Jokic fan, but I said Minnesota in 7, Denver in 7, et cetera, et cetera. So I gave both sides options. But I said predictions for Indiana versus New York, and I said New York in 7, New York in 6, New York in 5, or New York in 4, because literally it's one of those, man. It's not going to be Indiana in shit. I don't think personally, but man,
I did not vote on that one because I wanted to have at least Indiana in 7, but I know New York is going to win in probably like 5 or 6, more like 6.
You really think Indiana? Okay, so here's the thing. pace-wise, everyone's talking about the pace. Like, oh my God, the Pacers are going to run them off the floor. Bro, in order to have pace, you need to have transition. In order to get transition, you need to get defensive rebounds or stops. They don't defend well, and they don't rebound well. Indiana is going to get crucified.
And the Garden's going to rock. The Garden's going to be rocking tonight. I expect a blowout tonight.
I do too, personally. I do too. But I'm like, whenever I get so sure about something, I always caution myself. Like, I could be wrong. Like yesterday, I was positive that the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to win that game.
Halliburton better wake up. Whatever he's been doing that last series is not going to cut it. It ain't even going to be close to cutting it. It ain't going to be close. He better shake off this injury.
I don't think this is the type of injury you can just shake off.
Well, then it's a wrap.
Yeah. It's not the kind of injury. He needs the offseason to heal.
I just, again, I think the Milwaukee Bucks were a really, really good testament to how bad the Indiana Pacers are. Mm-hmm. And I really don't think people are looking at the 3 games that the Pacers and the Knicks played during the regular season. And I'm like, there's no basis for reality. OG, I don't think played any of those games. The New York Knicks with OG, with Isaiah Hartenstein, with Mitchell Robinson, are the second best team in the Eastern Conference. For sure. For me. Like, I stamp.
What happens? The Knicks go to the conference finals, okay? This is a likely scenario. They go to the conference finals. They lose to the Knicks in like 5 or 6, okay?
You mean they lose to the Celtics?
Celtics, sorry. They lose to the Celtics. What happens to Julius Randle? What do they do?
I don't know.
You trade him?
Trade him for what, though? The Raptors for Bruce Brown.
Brandon Ingram is on the trading block.
Okay. I got my GOAT Pascal in 6. Abdul Nasser Ismail saying I got my GOAT Pascal in 6. Yo, I feel like personally, like if the Pacers have a chance in hell,
but OG and Pascal.
Well, I mean, Pascal, like the only thing that keeps coming back to my mind is Pascal Siakam 52 points in the Garden.
In the Garden, yeah. Mm-hmm,
like he, sometimes there's that thing where you just like playing in a certain building, you have a positive memory of that building. He comes out tonight. I feel like because of, I don't think Doc Rivers is a good coach.
No.
In fact, I think he's a terrible coach. I think he is the bottom 5 coach in the NBA. So I'm not so super surprised that Pascal Siakam had a really hot start in that series before the team figured it out. I don't think Tom Thibodeau, with his defensive toolkit that he has with OG, Precious, Isaiah Hartenstein, I feel like this is the worst matchup in the world for Pascal Siakam. Personally, I do. So, but I say this to say that I don't think the Pacers have a chance in hell, but I could be wrong. And I'm just like, I'm taking such a strong stance. Like, I'm like, it's gonna be like, I'll be surprised if this game goes to 6 games. I'll be so surprised if the series goes to 6. But that being said, like, I'm gonna feel so stupid if the Pacers win this. Like, even tonight, like, I'd be shocked if the Pacers win. On the road, that would flip this series completely because now you have home court advantage. I don't know.
Yeah, but injuries happen too, right? So anything is possible. Look at Denver Nuggets, right? With
Jamal Murray.
Jamal Murray and what's his name of the other guy that came from the Lakers. So I think Milwaukee wins that series in possibly 5 or 6.
And what about Denver, Minnesota? You think Minnesota has a chance?
No, sorry. I think Minnesota wins the series in 5 or 6.
Ooh, 5 or 6.
If they win, the next game is a sweep.
They have a real chance of. Rob, do you think that Wolves can win tonight?
I do.
They could. They could.
And they're not and Vegas is not giving them any chance tonight. It's like 3-1.
Do you know
so
what's crazy?
I'm shocked.
The Lakers made every game close. The difference between the Lakers and the Wolves, for the most part, is the Wolves have depth. They actually have players after like 4 guys.
Mm-hmm.
The Lakers it was a doo-doo roster after like the 4th best player. Wolves have like 8 guys. You're getting something from the top 9. You're getting like 6 good games. The Lakers, they're lucky if they get D'Angelo Russell and maybe somebody else show up. Wolves have like 9 guys.
They're the best defensive team in the NBA. There are matchup problems for Denver Nuggets with the bigs that can shoot and this guy in the middle is Jokic
Yeah.
had to work for everything he got last game.
And
I feel like he has to be a lot better. I think Nikola Jokic he's definitely the best player in the series. I think Anthony Edwards
Yeah.
looks great, but Jokic is the best player in the series. I just think that Ant is clearly the second best player in the series. I think the difference will be, can Jamal Murray at least be the third best player in the series?
no, there's no hope for that.
No.
Oh, no, there is. But what I'm saying is the reason why Ant looks as good as he does is he has no resistance. Like, it's harder to stop him given their roster construction compared to, you know what I mean? Like, this roster is more built to stop the Nuggets' best player compared to the Nuggets' best player is not well equipped to stop the Wolves' best player, you know?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Like, I think the Denver Nuggets are very vulnerable right now. I believe in Jokic. Obviously, I think he's like a great player and he's the best player in the league and probably gonna be a top 10 player all time. He might already be a top 10 player of all time. Frankly, there's a lot of guys on that top 10 list that are quite questionable relative to him. However, you know, he needs help. He needs help in a big way. They've lost a lot of depth. I don't necessarily trust their depth, and especially when you're going up against the Minnesota Timberwolves, where they have three guys coming off their bench: Naz Reid, Kyle Anderson, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Where I'm like, every one of those guys would start for the Raptors. Every one of them, right? I think Nickeil would start over Gary Trent Jr. It's close. It's debatable, but I think he should.
It's not debatable. He plays defense.
That's true. And I mean, like, a friend of mine was like calling for Nickeil Alexander-Walker, not just because of the Canadian connection with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's calling for him like years ago. He's like, man, we got to trade for this guy. We got to trade for this guy. Yes. And Kyle Anderson, again, like, very comparable, if not better player than, Kelly Olynyk or whatever. And then Naz Reid clearly would be your center. So it's just like, when you have that depth, and by the way, you gutted your future draft assets and whatever to preserve that depth, because the big thing here was they kept Jaden McDaniels outside of that trade with Rudy Gobert, right? Danny Ainge wanted Jaden McDaniels. He wanted him badly. That was the big asking price. And the reason they conceded on all those picks and they gave up Walker Kessler, etc., was to keep Jaden McDaniels out of it. And people trolled them for it. They're like, oh my God, they're so happy they kept Jaden McDaniels. Who the fuck is Jaden McDaniels? Well, now Jaden McDaniels is the best perimeter defender in the NBA. Right. And that's worth, every penny he's going to get. It's going to be a very expensive team to keep together.
The box score in the last game against the Wolves Nuggets, game 1, Jokic took 25 shots, took 9 threes. That's not what he wanted.
He went 2 for 9.
Yeah,
he needs to go 5 for 9.
Yeah, but he doesn't want to take. A lot of those were forced. Like, he'd rather have not taken certain shots, but they made him do it. And one thing that
they're gonna make him do it again, right? Because they crowd the paint.
And they won't let him bring up the ball. They won't let him. It was interesting when Jokic. There was a stat, Jokic, when he brings the ball up, they scored like 1.5 points per possession. And it was like no one ever pressured him, but the Wolves were pressuring Jokic when he'd bring up the ball. Like, you're getting nothing. You're getting no real estate for free. Jaden McDaniels hounding Jamal Murray all the way down the court. It's just like,
I think desperation will play a huge factor into tonight. Obviously, the Wolves, they jumped on Denver right away. Yes. Right at the jump. Denver is one of those teams that's more experienced, cerebral. They're a very smart team, and I think they'll figure it out as they go. And I feel like there are certain series where, like, the longer it goes, the more it favors one side or the other. I think this series, the longer it goes, the more it favors Denver. So if the Minnesota Timberwolves are going to win, they're going to win in 5 or 6. But if it goes to 7, I expect it to go Denver's way. If that makes sense. It's not because I necessarily think one team is definitively better than the other. I think these are two pretty evenly matched teams. They just have like very different strengths and weaknesses. Whereas I think the experience in a game 7 will come up to, like, the Minnesota Timberwolves are making so many mistakes. They make so many mistakes. They're just so overwhelmingly good and so large and so talented.
Yeah.
that they are able to get away with it. And if you springboard tonight and, you just spring on Denver and Denver doesn't know what hit them, and, there's a little bit of, but guaranteed if tonight is a win for Minnesota, it will be because of shooting luck. It will take a combination of bad shooting luck for Denver and good shooting luck, because to win on the road 2 times against defending champions, you could take 30-1 odds on that happening a week ago. I don't think most people would have taken it.
Yeah, but for the Nuggets to win, Aaron Gordon has to play better, because they're just ignoring it.
That's true.
He has to step up. He has to contribute offensively.
He will. He is the person I'm least concerned about right now. Like, that guy cares so much.
And when you say better, he has to play better defense on Ant-Man.
So how do you approach Anthony Edwards? Do you start KCP on him, or do you just start with Aaron Gordon right away?
I start in church. I pray. I pray, to Jesus. Then I go over to the mosque. Then I pray to Allah. Then I go over to the temple and I pray to Ram. And then I go somewhere else and I pray to like whatever Mormon people. I'm just going around praying. I go on a pilgrimage around the world and just pray to every single. That's how I stop him, because frankly, like, I don't know how to stop him. Like, he gets to his spots too easy. He's too quick. He's so relentless. He is just like he just comes at you in this very unrelenting way.
He reminds me of young LeBron, where it's like he's getting to the rim. There's nothing you can do. It doesn't matter. He's getting to the rim, and he's too strong.
I think it's just it's
impossible to stop.
But this guy was able to stop him all the times we played him, right? OG.
I think OG did a great job on him.
Really great job. That I started avoiding OG.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, here's the thing. Here's a crazy thing. I am such a believer in the Knicks right now that I really think they could take a couple games off the Celtics. If Kristaps Porzingis is not okay, I fully think they can take a couple games off the Celtics, because I think, like, again, I don't expect Josh Hart to shoot this well.
They're not okay. I think Celtics is beatable. If their threes are not falling, they're beatable.
The Celtics give the Celtics in every series, regardless who their opponent is, they have the one lay an egg game. So just book that one win. They have one. We're just going to lay an egg. For no reason, we're just going to lay an egg. Can they get another win? That's the question. There's something off with that Celtic team. There's something off with them. I don't trust them at all.
SP saying, ask Peyton Watson to play as aggressive as he can on Ant and use the fouls if he needs to, then play Haka Gobert to force him off the floor. It's actually pretty interesting. I think Peyton Watson might be their only defense against Anthony Edwards. He has a lot of the OG stuff. He's strong, he's wiry, he's extremely good rim protector. He has great lateral quickness. I just think offensively you give up so much by having him out there. However, if Jamal Murray is not capable of being what he is usually, which is a shot creator and a guy who can get downhill, and I think maybe cutting back some of those Jamal minutes to keep him fresher, given his knee is going through all those issues, and boosting up Peyton Watson's minutes, especially as a one-on-one defender. I think the SP is on a point here, because I think Peyton Watson is truly one of those players where, like, if he was not so important to them, he would have been on my list of guys the Raptors should target. He's one of my favorite young players in the NBA. I wonder if Christian Brown can do anything. I think they can live with Anthony Edwards going off. I just don't think they can live with Karl-Anthony Towns going off.
I agree. Yeah, but and then the other guy from the bench.
I don't know if they can stop Karl-Anthony Towns, because a lot of his is just he doesn't even hijack the offense. Everything's in the flow of the offense, and he's super talented. Like, you give that dude any space, he's shooting like 45% on threes. Like,
yeah, I think to approach basketball from the coaching perspective, I think you always look at it in terms of the same way that they explained the Titanic sinking in that movie. In Titanic, they talk about how Titanic can stay afloat as long as 4 compartments are not flooded. But the minute the 5th compartment floods, it sinks, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with basketball. I think, like, you can live with a 50 piece from Anthony Edwards, because it's not in itself going to beat you. What you cannot do is have Rudy Gobert go 10 for 12 and Naz Reid score 16 points in the 4th quarter and Nikhil Alexander-Walker hit a whole bunch of threes, and Jaden McDaniels hit like 5 threes. You can't have all of that happening, because then it's just like it's too much. It overwhelms you, and now you have to score 160 points, and you're never going to score 150 points against this team. So I think it's going to come down to picking your poison, and I think typically like that's kind of what Orlando did with Donovan Mitchell, right? They were like, we're gonna pressure everything else, and we're gonna let Donovan Mitchell kind of do what he does. We're not gonna send too much of a double team until it's necessary, and we're gonna stick Jalen Suggs on him. And it helps to have the personnel to be able to do that. And I think that's the problem right now is if you put Jamal Murray on Jaden McDaniels, right? How do you stop Anthony Edwards? You can't stop. You just don't have the personnel to stop this guy in your starting lineup. Your best bet is probably Aaron Gordon.
It is Aaron
But
Gordon.
then if Aaron Gordon is on him, that means Nikola Jokic, who's not a great defender by any means, is going 1-on-2 inside defensive rebounding against Karl-Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert. And his only help is Michael Porter Jr. It's a really flawed roster construction. And in a lot of ways, I think like as much as I celebrate the Nuggets winning the championship last year, and I think it's a very worthy championship, they had a really soft route, man. They had a really soft route to the championship. They barely had to face anybody.
I mean, honestly, I believe the Lakers were their toughest challenge.
Right.
4 rough games. I don't think anybody tested them more. Even though it was a sweep, there were no 4 consecutive games that tested them more than the Lakers games. I don't believe that.
And I mean, like, they would have had a harder time. I mean, as much as I respect what the Heat did and they deserve to win the way they did, I mean, they won because other teams shit the bed.
Mm-hmm.
They won because Milwaukee and Boston, frankly, shit the bed. I don't believe that that Milwaukee, like with all the pressure that Giannis puts on the inside and in transition and, the total skill package and how much, someone like Brook Lopez would have stretched Denver's defense out with Nikola Jokic. You know what I mean? Like, I think Boston, like, sometimes it just comes down to matchups, right? Like, you can say, yeah, we play these 7-game series so that the best team faces the best team, but it's never the case in the finals that the best team is facing the best team. Almost never the case, right? It's always like some injury happens somewhere or some, and so I look at a team like Denver versus, Minnesota, and I'm like, okay, you were legitimately facing one of the top 4 teams in the league right now. How are you doing? And not well. And there's sometimes where you look at a team like, a Miami Heat, San Antonio Spurs, the Golden State Warriors. You look at these dynasties, sort of like lukewarm dynasties, or the Shaq and Kobe Lakers, and you're just like, what is the separation between them and the next best team, or the 90s Chicago Bulls? Like, what is the separation? Can they withstand a key rotation piece being kind of injured? Is the gap still so large? And I think like with teams like, the Golden State Warriors with KD, like the gap was so large that they could withstand KD not being 100%. They could withstand Steph nursing a tough ankle or whatever and still probably win. Whereas right now, I think the gap between the Denver Nuggets and their next best team is just not very large, if it exists at all.
That Warriors team with KD, they had the most margin for error probably since the Russell Celtics. Like, it was crazy.
Right.
The amount of talent on that roster.
Facts.
But the last game between Nuggets and Wolves, Mike Conley played better than Murray. That can never happen again. Conley had 14 points, 10 assists, 5 of 8 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3.
Mm-hmm.
He scored 14 points on 8 shots. Murray scored 17 points on 14 shots.
Yeah, why do you avoid that from happening when Murray is hurt, right? And he has Ant on him.
I'm just saying. And they got nothing from McDaniels. McDaniels scored 0 points. 0 of 7.
Right. Abdul saying Wemby has won Rookie of the Year. Congratulations. The biggest surprise in league history. There was a time, believe it or not, 40 games in, that we were debating Chet versus Wemby, and it was in Chet's argument was solid. But Victor Wembanyama, the last half of the season was holy fucking shit.
He should even win the Defensive Player of the Year.
He probably could make a very rational case for it, yes.
Like, but they're not going to give him because they didn't make the playoffs too.
Dude, I released a reel the other day on Instagram. I don't know if you saw it, but like what Victor Wembanyama does to deter like offensive players at the rim.
I said that, yeah.
With the Jaws music. Oh my God. It's like people are so scared of this guy. And I mean, like that is defense. Defense is deterrence. Defense is discomfort. Like that's all defense is. Anyways.
Eventually they're going to figure him out one way or the other. If you watch
Spurs better go all in.
Against the Boston Celtics.
The Spurs cannot waste another year. This guy, he's going to be way too good next year to just have whatever the hell was around him again.
I think his window to title contention starts in 2026. I think from that point on, he will be a permanent staple in the Western Conference Finals. Yeah. They will not do a bad job. And it's interesting. I was thinking about the Raptors and the Spurs as like these two very solid organizations that often do things the right way and develop the right way, et cetera, or historically they have. And I think about how many teams currently have benefited from these two teams tearing it down. Like, look at Indiana. Everyone's talking about OG versus Pascal, blah, 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 blah. Those are Raptor productions, right? People are talking about Derek White and his contributions for San Antonio, DeJounte Murray in Atlanta. People are talking about Jakob Poeltl in Toronto and what he did for them last year. And it's like, those are all Spurs exports. You know what I mean? Kawhi Leonard in LA. Right. Look at how much talent went out the door for the Spurs. Like how much talent they had. They had DeMar DeRozan, Derek White, DeJounte Murray on the same team.
Yeah.
Think about those players now.
I know. And
right. All three of them were in contention for All-Star this year. All of them.
Are you insinuating we should tank multiple years to get the next OMB?
No, what he's saying is unlike
I know.
They let go of guys for the greater good. They let go of guys when they needed to let go of them instead of just holding on for dear life.
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger point that I'm making is that maybe, just maybe, you have a reputation. Once you develop this type of reputation, you develop this reputation around the league that you know what you're doing when it comes to development and player personnel and stuff. There's like a cachet of like richness. Like you want to be, how do I explain this? It's like, okay, for instance, like working at Amazon, right? Probably a horrible experience and no one should ever experience it. It's a terrible company. However, other companies love hiring ex-Amazon employees. It's just, it's a notch in the hat. It's like, oh, you're so well trained. It's like,
they walk them to death.
Partially that, but partially because the tech stack skills that you get working at Amazon, especially on the development side, is like very crucial because it translates very well to what other companies are trying to mimic. And so it's like the same thing as hiring a person who graduated from Harvard or graduated from MIT. So it's like the same thing where it's like the Raptors could potentially, develop this reputation. They already have developed this reputation as great exporters of talent, right? You might look at this and say, look at how great OG has been. Look at how great. I mean, if I'm Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster, this is like literally my sales pitch to every single team that I'm pitching Chris Boucher to this offseason is look at how great our players do once they leave our situation. Look at Delano Banton blowing up in, Portland and shooting threes and going crazy. Look at Yuta Watanabe leading the league in 3-point shooting for half the season. Look at, basically if we're giving up on a player, it's not like because
Malachi scoring 50 points.
Malachi scoring 50 points. It should just be a highlight package that you just present. It's a sales package. It's a sales slideshow where you have one picture of Malachi scoring 50, you have another picture of Delano Banton hitting 6 threes, you have Utah leading the league in scoring, leading the league in 3-point shooting. You probably have like Aaron Baines somewhere in Australia on a beach somewhere. You have OG Anunoby getting defensive player of the year consideration, and you just say like, hey, we're idiots. We keep getting rid of these guys, but we're really good at developing them so that they do well in other systems. It's like, there's this thing in college where you typically find that players, like for instance, Kentucky guards,
yeah,
every Kentucky guard today is benefiting from every Kentucky guard in the past. So at some point, do Raptor prospects like Ochai Agbaji in a couple of years, do they benefit in terms of having a trade value boost because of OG, Pascal, etc.? I think it's worth thinking about.
Even look at what RJ Barrett is doing, right? You said it on your last video. Quickly, who you? I didn't join this stream at the beginning. Who you got for number 19 pick?
I don't know yet.
Have you scouted this guy from France, Pacom Dadiet?
Nope.
Please do. I think he's gonna rise like Koulibaly of last year.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm. He's like 6.
Where would Bilal Koulibaly go in this draft? He would go top 3, bro.
Yeah, Probably top 4.
So I'm not sure he would rise that much, but I'm getting really open to this idea of losing this pick, and I'm very open to the idea if we get the pick of trading the pick. I'm open to all options at this point.
If the pick is not top 2, top 3, I'm open to losing it.
I'm open either case. I think like Alex Sarr,
would you pick?
Hmm?
If it's number 1, who do you pick?
That's the tough thing, right? Like, I mean, for weeks I've been on Zachary Reese-Shea, right? But I don't really think of him as like a first overall.
I think I live in the side in a heartbeat. Watching this guy, even though I know I'm not expecting him to be like a superstar player, but watching Evan Mobley, I think he'll feature with Scotty because of the blocks.
I don't think Alex Sarr is better than Evan Mobley. I don't think he's even close to Evan Mobley. I think Evan Mobley is just a way smarter, more fluid.
Better, right? But we need rim protection. He doesn't rebound. He doesn't rebound very well.
My question is, you just saw Evan Mobley get punked, frankly, by the Orlando Magic. He got physically bullied immensely, and this was in his 3rd year. Okay, so fast track 3 years. Let's assume that he is set. Let's assume he's diet Evan Mobley. That's not a play on words for their for their lack of weight. But I'm saying let's imagine he's like a poor man's Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley today is barely helping the Cavs. Like, I mean, defensively he's tremendous, but offensively he's a liability. You don't have enough offensive firepower to waste a first overall pick on an offensive liability.
But Alexander Sarr has some offense, right? He has the mid-range.
He has some offense, but I mean, Evan Mobley, when he came into the league, he had some offense as well. He was not considered a defense-only prospect. There was like, there's budding jump shot, budding playmaking.
He only has 3 moves, right? And he's not really developed from those 3 moves. Yeah, and it's all around the rim, right? With back and turn around and shoot, and it's not. And also it's in a team that has not really helped him because he has guys that are like trigger happy.
Right. So SB saying, would you trade number 1 for number 15 on a future pick? Is it too little or is it too good for a specific draft? I would not. I would not at all. I understand why someone might. It would have to, like, if I was doing that, it would have to be like number 15 plus the Charlotte Hornets unprotected 2025 first, or something crazy like that. Or like number 15 plus what team is even going to be so bad next year? That's I'm having trouble mapping out the bottom next year. Who's going to be the worst team in the league next year? I don't know. San Antonio's taking a rise.
A lot of teams are going to tank towards the second half.
We don't know who those teams are though yet, because I mean, one of those teams could be, the Sacramento Kings if they decide to sell off, some players and go younger. I don't know. I have no idea. They could trade Domantas Sabonis. We don't know. This league is very unpredictable in that way, right? Memphis Grizzlies. I mean, they could be really good next year if Ja Morant comes back and Jaren Jackson and all their young players that are developing, and you know what I mean? Like, they could be pretty damn good next year, or they could be terrible. You know what I mean? Like, Ja Morant's not himself and there's dysfunction and whatever. Like the Warriors, they could be the worst team in the league next year. Couldn't they? They could be. Or they could hit reset around Steph Curry and they could have a resurgence season. There's so many teams with like this fluctuation.
You saw the report that Klay Thompson is considering Orlando Magic?
Yeah, that would be interesting. I haven't seen that, but that would be interesting. Yeah. Anyways, we are 20 minutes away from Indiana versus New York. I got to go get prepped for that. But thanks a lot for calling in, guys. Any final thoughts?
All right, guys. I guess Sunday at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. Let's see what happens.
3 o'clock. I think it's 3 o'clock.
You're doing the live stream. I'm not gonna watch.
You don't want to know.
I don't want to know until later. I want to see it pop up on Twitter. I just don't want to watch it. Seriously.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because what you said yesterday, right? If somebody moves up, say the 9th pick moved up, right? Then we're almost like 90% not keeping the pick. Then I don't want that stress.
The math on that is not clear at all. Actually, the Raptors have like I want to say like a 30% ish chance of being one of the top 4.
Yeah, but if somebody from like 8 or 9 moves up, right, then, or maybe like 10th move up, then
It doesn't have
yes,
anything. That doesn't have anything to do with anything. That's just emotions. The logic of it is
I
the
know,
the, the,
I
the
know.
draft order. So like the only way what you're saying would make sense is if the draft order was being determined as it was being revealed, but it's already been done. That's
Hmm.
why the math of it is important. So the
Yes.
Raptors have like, and that's I just keep thinking of it. 45-55 is the equation in my head, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's like a 32, I think 32 to 33% chance that the
Of
Raptors
getting
have a
top four.
top four pick.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a pretty good shot at a top four pick.
It
It's a one
is,
in three,
right?
man. It's a 1 in 3. It's a 1 in 3 coin toss, right? But the problem is you have a 55% chance of
Of
losing your pick. And that is more than 1 in 3. And so that's where I say, you'll be lucky to keep it if you do, but I'm cool with it if we don't. Yeah.
All right, guys.
All
Thanks
right.
so much.
Peace, man. See ya.
See ya.
Yeah. Coach Mo, any final thoughts, man?
Yeah, the first game is just a prequel for the real game,
The first game, as in the first game tonight?
Yeah, I'm gonna enjoy both games, but we know the Nuggets Wolves is that's the grown men playing. That's what I mean. This
12:30, man. 12:30 is going to be live. Holy shit. I'm going to be
I just feel like,
exhausted.
I just feel like the Knicks Pacers is like,
I'm nervous. I mean,
the
like,
JV
because,
team. It's like the
it's an
JV
old
team.
it's an old rivalry. It's an old rivalry. It could go. Again, the Pacers. It's hard to judge these two teams because both teams made these really massive moves, right? And it's ironic as a Raptor fan to watch it because both of the massive moves were with us, right? We were the ones who took back Bruce Brown. We were the ones who took back RJ Barrett and Emmanuel Quickly. It's also really ironic for the Raptors as a team to watch this, probably Masai Ujiri to watch this series and watch his two golden boys facing off against each other.
This whole talk about pace and Thibodeau only playing like 6 guys. Does Precious get burned in the series?
Yeah, I think he does.
Man,
I think he does.
Precious is still Precious. He does one great thing and then one dumb thing. It's just, it's like you want to root for him and then you're like, oh, there he is. There's the Precious we know. There he is.
Yeah, I think because they limit his minutes and his role and, just overall, I think those dumb plays have been fewer and far in between because he doesn't have as much latitude and as much freedom to express himself offensively. I'm pretty sure like someone had a chat with him and be like, hey, you're not a point forward here. Relax, get in the fucking paint and, blocks out. And he's been great. He had some really, really high moments when they hit some foul trouble, I believe, against the Philadelphia 76ers. Like he had some really impressive, like he took over the game for 2 minutes. Like he was incredible. Athletically, he's going to give them all sorts of trouble. I think Obi Toppin, Pascal Siakam, I don't think okay, so the reason this series is nerve-wracking for me is if Pascal Siakam succeeds in this series, I do have some egg on my face because I'm gonna have to take back like a lot of stuff that I've said.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit nervous in that sense because I've taken such a hard stand on this series, being like they're gonna expose Siakam and blah blah blah. So Siakam comes out tonight and scores 40 points because they let him to some extent because that could be how they approach this, right? They could be like, hey, we're gonna let Siakam get his. We're gonna put OG on somebody else. We're going to let Siakam get his, and we're just going to trust that they're not going to beat us that way. So if Siakam starts scoring 40, 35, whatever, people are going to be like, oh my God, see, we gave up like Scotty's never going to be this good. And then that conversation starts all over again. And every person in the Toronto media is fucking watching this series, waiting for the second Siakam goes off for a really, really big performance.
Siakam over OG, huh? The Toronto media.
They for sure are. I am for 100% rooting for OG.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I find Knicks fans to be obnoxiously annoying, I'm 100% rooting for OG. And I think Jalen Brunson has had some very good success against this team, and he's going to continue to have success. They don't really have a lot that they can put on him. If they put, I'm curious to see who Tyrese Halliburton guards. I'm curious to see how they guard pick and roll. I'm curious to see if OG Anunoby can make any sort of offensive impact in this series. A lot of curious things. So game ones are always exciting that way, and like you don't know, and again, we really don't have any evidence for how these teams match up because the times that they matched up, they weren't at full strength, right? Like I look at a team like the New York Knicks with Josh Hart grabbing 4 fucking offensive rebounds a game, and I'm like, dude, he did that against Milwaukee. He's going to do that like times 2 against Indiana. You know, Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein, like who the hell is putting a body on those guys?
And the only thing that bothers Brunson is size. It's length. It's physicality doesn't bother Brunson. It's length that bothers him. Like people who are like 3-4 inches taller than him. Who are they going to put on that?
Halliburton is 3-4 inches taller than him though. Halliburton's 6'5". So like, I mean, you know, if you think about it,
he'll bully him physically. Right? I mean, they had Oubre, they had Batum, right? They had Harris. Like these guys are. I don't think
they're going to stick Halliburton on Brunson on an island and say, okay, guard him. He's not guarding him at all. I know that. It's going to be Nesmith on him, and I think Nesmith is a great matchup for Jalen Brunson. What I'm more curious about is how does Pascal Siakam guard the pick and roll? How does he hedge and recover to the corners? How does Miles Turner serve as a rim protector, and can they box out enough so that Indiana loses the possession battle by less than 10? Because I see a version of this game tonight where New York takes like 15 more shots or 18 more shots, and it won't matter how much more, because again, like the equation, the part of the equation that I'm so shocked that most analysts are not seeing, and that's why I'm a little bit nervous, because I'm just like, when I'm going against the grain so hard, I'm like, what am I missing? Like, I think this series is so obviously New York. What am I missing where other people are saying this could be Indiana in 6, Indiana in 7, the pace, the transition, etc.? I'm just like, what am I missing? Like, am I wrong? Like, what the fuck am I missing here? So I'm curious. I'm curious to see if I'm right.
If Turner is making his threes, Miles Turner, the Pacers are a different team. When he's hitting, it's a different team completely. But yeah, Pascal's scoring. I mean, he scored 39 in the first game, and it meant nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It meant absolutely nothing. The defense didn't react. He's scoring 1-on-1 against Bobby Portis. Like, it meant absolutely nothing. It's like, all right, cool. We're still going to win this game, you know?
I think what the thing with high volume 3-point shooting teams like Indiana is that there's always the potential for shooting variance or shooting luck resulting in a blowout. There's always that. Like, shooting teams always have that like high variance of like they could lose a game by 20 just as likely as they could win a game by 25, because you're not like stopping guys from shooting. You're just deterring the right guys from shooting the right shots. So it's like, what if the wrong shots start to go in for Indiana because they take so many threes? Like, the variance just continues to go up. There's also the element of offensive talent. Clearly, you know, when I look at Josh Hart shooting out of his mind in the first round, I don't expect that to continue, you know? So I'm curious. I think maybe I'm a little too high on the Knicks. I'll be curious to see if I'm wrong. But yeah, anyways, I'm going to go prepare for that series, and I will, I don't know if you're going to be around at 1 a.m. tonight, but I'll be doing another live.
All right, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Peace. Have a good one. Alrighty, as I said, I will be doing another live after the game, Minnesota versus Denver, most likely. Well, I will 100% be doing that live, but I'm saying most likely I will be doing just one live. There's a chance I might be doing 2. So again, worst case scenario, I'm going to do a live at 12:30 at the conclusion, or 12:45 at the conclusion of Denver versus Minnesota, and we can talk about Indiana versus New York and Denver versus Minnesota. And hopefully we are talking about Denver evening the series and New York winning. But if we're not, then you're going to see me with my face very long and very confused about this whole thing. But yeah, okay, I'll talk to y'all later, and make sure to hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff on the way out. We just passed 9,400 subscribers, which is pretty cool. Yeah, praise the shorts, man. And we also, I think we just passed 5 million channel views. I'm pretty sure it was like 5,500,000 channel views. So that's awesome. That's amazing. We are just 2 years old. So continuing to grow, continuing to do good stuff, a lot of stuff ahead this year. So please subscribe if you haven't already. All right, talk to you later. Oh, and I do want to give a big thank you because I didn't get a chance to while we were in mid-conversation. Kevin Rio for $20 super chat. Thank you so much, man. And Rank Scrub, need what Precious was supposed to be, mobile bigs, the super chat here. thank you guys so much for the super chat. I completely agree. I wish Precious Achiuwa was not approaching, restricted free agency. And I really wish that, his development had been perhaps handled a little bit differently. But yes, in spurts, there was always that breadcrumb of potential that Precious Achiuwa flashed where you'd see it and you'd be like, man, if you could put that together. And there were weeks with his Raptors tenure where you're like, this guy's permanent staple. I remember last year when OG Anunoby got injured and Precious Achiuwa stepped in the starting lineup. I think people were openly questioning whether or not OG was expendable and tradable because of how great Precious was. But then he goes to the bench and then it just all falls apart. So the high levels of variance maybe are the reason that he's not getting playoff burn right now. But I think he'll be unleashed in this series. He matches up really, really well with Obi Toppin and Pascal Siakam. And I think for Pascal, the weirdest thing is he's going to be going up against two guys who know him very well. And if what Bilal Coulibaly said about Pascal Siakam in that he is very predictable and very easy to stop because his moves are very repetitive and he's not great on the counters. If that's true, then that will be proven true in this series more than most because he's going up against two guys who are probably more familiar with this game than any players in the league, in Precious Achiuwa and OG Anunoby. So, alrighty, we'll talk to you later, guys. Have a good one. Peace. Abdul Nasser saying, if we get to 10K, can we get a Scotty special? Sounds like a good idea. All right. Talk to you later. Peace.